Welcome, traveler of the imagination. Take a slow breath in and let it drift out. Once more, deeply in and softly release. Now settle into comfort as we journey far back in time, before pyramids and pharaohs, the eternal thread of water that carved its way through a world much different from the Egypt we know today. Close your eyes and picture it. Around 10,000 years before our own age, the land that would become Egypt was not desert. It was alive with green and water and animals whose shadows crossed the wide plains. Where now there are seas of sand, then stretched grasslands, forests, and sprawling savannas. The air was warm, scented with flowering shrubs, damp earth, and the musk of animals who roamed in abundance. The Nile flowed through it all, steady and unhurried, its waters fed by distant rains in the heart of Africa. Each year, as it swelled with the pulse of the seasons, it brought with it a gift, the soft black silt that spread across its banks, rich with promise, rich with life. Imagine standing at the edge of this ancient river, toes pressed into the cool, wet soil. The sun is rising in a pale orange glow, painting the horizon in shades of gold. Birds stir in the reeds. The air is filled with the trills and cries of waterfowl, ibis, herons, and geese, lifting into the morning. Across the fields, elephants move in slow, deliberate steps, their tusks gleaming ivory white. Nearby, tall-necked giraffes stretch toward leafy branches, while antelope graze in cautious clusters, ears flicking at every sound. Hippos roll in the river's shallows, grunting in the warm mud. And somewhere in the shadows, hidden in tall grasses, a leopard waits, patient and silent. This was Egypt before the desert came. Along the river, small groups of people lived in harmony with these rhythms. They were hunters, gatherers, fishers, wanderers following the water. Men and women moved with quiet skill, their eyes attuned to the slightest track in the soil, the shimmer of fish in the current, the trail of berries in the shrubs. They carried simple tools of stone, sharpened with care, and baskets woven from reeds. Picture a woman wading into the shallows of the river, her feet breaking the mirrored surface. She holds a bundle of reeds bound into a rough net. With slow patience, she dips it into the water, lifting silver fish that wriggle and glisten in the light. Children laugh nearby, chasing frogs along the banks. Farther inland, men stalk antelope across the grasslands. Their spears are tipped with flint. Their eyes follow every flicker of movement in the tall savanna grass. When the hunt is done, fire crackles into the evening sky. Families gather close, sitting around the warmth. The smell of roasted meat mingles with the scent of wild herbs. Above them, the heavens stretch vast and endless. Stars glimmer like a river of light, flowing as eternal as the Nile itself. At night, the sound of insects hums in the cool air. The river moves slowly in the dark, carrying secrets toward the north. Beneath the canopy of stars, people speak in murmurs, perhaps of the spirits of animals, perhaps of the ancestors who walked before them, perhaps simply of tomorrow's tasks. This was life, steady and simple, cradled in the arms of the great river. But time was shifting. The rains that once fell across the Sahara began to fade. Lakes that shimmered in the open grasslands grew smaller. The forests thinned. Year by year, the savanna began to dry. What was once a green and fertile world slowly began to retreat, leaving behind dust and heat, bare earth, and stretches of sand. Perhaps the people noticed the changes in the water first. The pools where hippos once splashed grew shallow. The herds of antelope no longer wandered as widely. The elephants, the giraffes, the predators, they moved farther, seeking grass where little remained. The land itself was changing, and with it, the lives of those who depended on it. But through it all, the Nile endured. The river did not abandon them. Its waters still rose with the pulse of distant rains. Its black silt still fed the soil along its banks. And so people moved closer. Drawn tighter to its lifeline, they built their shelters nearer to the flow. The Nile became more than a river. It became home. Imagine their first shelters, humble things of reeds and clay, shaped into huts that leaned against the wind. Smoke rose gently from hearths, carrying the smell of cooked fish and roasted grains. At dawn, the people emerged to greet the river. At dusk, they returned to sit by its edge. The Nile became their constant companion, the rhythm by which they lived. And then slowly, something new began to take shape. One day, someone scattered seeds on a patch of wet soil, and when the season turned, green shoots rose where the silt was dark. Perhaps it was an accident. Perhaps it was memory, an observation that where seeds fell, plants grew. But soon it became intention. People began to plant, to wait, to harvest. No longer only hunters and gatherers, they became gardeners of the river. With planting came permanence. With permanence came belonging. Families returned to the same stretch of land each year, tending the earth, watching it yield. Shelters grew sturdier, woven with greater care. Clay jars held water. Reed baskets stored grain. The rhythm of life shifted, guided not only by animals and seasons, but by the soil, by the careful tending of seeds. And always, always the Nile flowed on. At night, under the soft sweep of stars, the people must have looked to the river with awe. Its waters, endless and mysterious, rose and fell as though by divine breath. It gave food. It gave water. It gave life. In time, it would give gods and myths and kingdoms. But here, at the dawn, it was simply the eternal companion of humankind. The nights grew quieter as the desert spread. The voices of elephants faded. The giraffes disappeared. Leopards retreated into memory. Yet along the Nile, life did not fade. It grew. It adapted. It endured. Picture the village at twilight. Smoke curling above reed huts. The air filled with the laughter of children, the low voices of elders, the rhythmic beat of hands grinding grain into flour. Firelight flickers on faces weary from labor, but warmed by togetherness. Beyond the glow, the land stretches silent, already surrendering to sand. But the Nile, glimmering silver under the moon, whispers that it will remain. Here begins the story of Egypt. Not yet of kings, nor of pyramids, nor of gods carved in stone, but of people simple and steadfast, who found in the river a reason to stay, a reason to hope, a reason to dream. The dawn of the Nile was the dawn of belonging, the gentle beginning of one of humanity's longest stories. Close your eyes and feel the rhythm of that ancient water. Slow, eternal, unchanging, the Nile flowing through time itself. And so we leave the people of this first age, sitting by their fires, listening to the river's song. A song that will guide them into the next chapter of their history, where seeds of permanence will grow into villages, and villages will rise into kingdoms. But for now, in this quiet dawn, we rest by the waters at the beginning of it all. The people who once wandered now stay. They have learned the mystery of seeds, the promise of earth. In the dark soil left by the river's yearly floods, they scatter grain with careful hands. Barley, wheat, and emmer, small kernels pressed into the moist ground, begin to rise in neat green blades. The people watch with awe, for here, in the rhythm of planting and harvest, life becomes something more permanent. The cycle is simple, yet wondrous. Each year, the Nile swells with the rains that fall far to the south, spilling over its banks, covering the land in water and black mud. When the waters slowly retreat, the earth they leave behind is rich, dark, and full of life. Into this soil, hands scatter seeds, and when the sun warms the ground, fields of grain sway gently in the breeze. Families gather the harvest, storing some for food, saving the best seeds for the season yet to come. In this way, the rhythm of the river becomes the rhythm of life itself. Cattle wander near the water's edge, their hooves sinking into the soft soil. Goats bleat softly as they graze on reeds and brush, their milk shared among the families. Chickens cluck in the courtyards of small homes, scratching at the earth for scraps of grain. These animals, once hunted, now live alongside the people, fed and protected, their lives intertwined with human survival. Villages begin to appear along the banks, small clusters of homes shaped from reeds and clay. The walls are smooth, baked hard by the sun. Roofs are woven from palm leaves, rustling in the breeze. Smoke curls gently from hearths where meals are cooked, grain simmering in clay pots, fish roasting on glowing embers. The air carries the scent of wet earth, the sharpness of smoke, the faint sweetness of drying dates. Children run barefoot through the dust, their laughter mingling with the rustle of the papyrus. They chase one another with sticks, or toss pebbles into the river, watching the ripples spread wide. Fishermen paddle narrow boats of papyrus, sliding silently across the water, their nets trailing behind them in long arcs. Sometimes, a catch of gleaming fish fills their baskets. Other times, they return empty-handed, but never without reverence for the river's generosity. In these quiet communities, life begins to hold the shape of permanence. People no longer follow the herds or search endlessly for wild fruit. They know where their food will come from. They know that as long as the river flows, the black earth, Kemet, the black land, will provide. This is the first time the land itself takes on a name, and the people begin to call it so, distinguishing the fertile riverbanks from the endless red sands of the desert beyond. Within the villages, culture begins to bloom in delicate forms. Clay pots, once plain, are now decorated with markings, simple lines, swirls, and painted shapes, perhaps telling stories, perhaps only pleasing the eye. Beads are strung from shells, bones, and colored stones, worn around the necks of women, the wrists of children, the arms of hunters. Small figurines are shaped from clay, tiny animals, human forms, symbols whose meanings may be lost to us, but which surely carried weight in the hearts of those who held them. As families sit by firelight at dusk, sparks rising into the darkening sky, stories must have been told. Stories of the river's gifts, of ancestors, of spirits that lingered in the reeds and the stars. In the glow of the hearth, these stories settled into memory, carrying with them the first breath of myth, the first echo of the gods that would one day be named. The Nile's rhythm becomes not only the measure of survival, but the foundation of a new way of thinking. Flood, retreat, planting, harvest. Each stage follows the other, as sure as the sun follows the night. The people learn to trust it, to shape their lives around it. In this rhythm lies stability, and in stability lies growth. And with growth comes connection. The villages do not live in isolation. The river is a road, carrying boats of papyrus from one bend to another, linking communities along its long body. Sometimes these boats carry baskets of grain, sometimes jars of beer brewed from barley, sometimes beads, tools, or freshly fired pots, and sometimes something rarer, a shell from the distant Red Sea, polished smooth by waves, turquoise stones from the mountains of Sinai, obsidian, black and sharp, from the highlands far to the south. These are treasures from beyond, carried along the Nile in quiet trade, exchanged for food, for labor, for companionship. This flow of objects brings with it the flow of ideas. A mark scratched into a pot, a symbol traced on a piece of bone, a simple design pressed into clay. Perhaps these are the first hints of writing, the faint beginning of what would one day become the language of kings. The soundscape of these villages is gentle. The lowing of cattle in the morning, the rhythmic pounding of grain into flour, the splash of oars dipping into the river, the rustle of papyrus stalks in the wind, the occasional cry of a bird soaring overhead. Each sound adds to the symphony of life by the river, a symphony as old as memory itself. Imagine walking through one of these early villages. The ground beneath your feet is firm, stamped by many steps. The homes stand close together, walls pale and cracked in the sun. A woman sits by the doorway of her house, shaping clay into pots. Her hands are wet, her movements steady, and as the pot takes form, the sun begins to bake it hard. Nearby, a man sharpens a flint blade, striking stone against stone until the edge gleams. Children dart between houses, shouting, laughing, chasing one another through the dust. At the river's edge, a fisherman kneels beside his boat, checking his nets for holes. A fire burns in the center of the village, its smoke rising in a thin column against the sky. Around it, elders speak softly, watching the children, watching the river. The sense of belonging here is strong. For the first time, people are not only surviving, they are living in communities that last beyond the seasons. These villages are the seeds of something far greater, though the people do not yet know it. To them, life is simply the cycle of flood and harvest, the hum of daily tasks, the laughter of children, the song of the river. But we, looking back, can see the foundations being laid. In the storing of grain, there is the first glimpse of wealth. In the tending of cattle, the first glimpse of property. In the marks on clay, the first glimpse of language. In the exchange of shells and stones, the first glimpse of trade and connection. Each small act, each simple rhythm, is a stone in the vast structure of civilization that is to come. As the sun sets over the river, its light bathing the black soil in shades of red and gold, the villagers gather for their evening meal. Pots are uncovered, smoke drifts upward, and the air fills with warmth. Children sit close to their parents. The elders murmur blessings. The cattle settle for the night, their bodies casting long shadows across the fields. Beyond the edge of the village, the desert waits in silence, but here, on the fertile banks of Kemet, life thrives. The river flows on, steady, eternal, carrying not only water but the promise of all that will be. These small villages, fragile yet enduring, are the roots from which a mighty tree will grow. They are the beginning of Egypt's story, the quiet dawn of civilization itself. Close your eyes now, and feel the rhythm of their world. The steady beat of footsteps on packed earth, the gentle crackle of fire, the laughter of children fading into the night, the whisper of the Nile, flowing endlessly, carrying the seeds of greatness within its current. This is the world of the first farmers, the first villagers, the first keepers of Kemet, the Black Land. From these humble beginnings will rise temples, kings, and monuments that touch the sky. But for now, in this moment, there is only the quiet of evening, the glow of hearth fires, and the promise of tomorrow's harvest. The Nile flows on. Generations pass, and the small villages that once clung to its banks begin to grow. Reed huts and clay shelters multiply. Families that once knew only a few neighbors now find themselves in towns, with streets of packed earth winding between larger homes. The smoke of many hearths rises into the sky. From morning to dusk, voices hum with the sound of labor, of trade, of the rituals of daily life. These are no longer scattered bands of farmers. These are communities with leaders, men who rise to guide their people, to settle disputes, to speak for the river and the land. They are chieftains, practical rulers at first, but over time something more. For the people look to them not only for order, but for the whispers of the divine. Their voices carry weight like the river itself, shaping how their people live and believe. It is during this age that a culture flourishes along the Nile, remembered now as the Naqada culture. Around 4,000 years before the Common Age, the people of Naqada begin to shape the river's gifts into art, into tools, into symbols of power. Their hands mold clay into vessels of striking form. Pots painted with flowing lines that depict boats drifting upon water. Figures of dancers with arms outstretched, animals that run across the curves of earthen jars. These are not mere containers for food or drink. They are expressions of life, of spirit, of imagination. In the sunlight, new materials glimmer. Jewelry is crafted with patience and devotion. Beads strung from turquoise mined in distant Sinai, from lapis lazuli that gleams deep blue, from hammered gold pulled from the earth. Around the necks and wrists of the living, these treasures shine. And in death, they follow their owners into the soil, buried with reverence as offerings for the journey beyond. The people shape copper too, drawn from the rock, beaten into tools and blades that gleam red in the sun. Their edges cut cleaner, their shine brighter than flint. Farmers hold them with pride, and artisans fashion them into shapes that carry not only utility but beauty. The towns of Naqada grow larger, more structured, as though the rhythm of the Nile is mirrored in the rhythm of their communities. Houses cluster around central spaces. Granaries rise to store the harvest, built stronger, higher, more secure. Men and women work in organized groups, crafting, farming, fishing, herding. Leadership becomes more than a single voice. It becomes an institution, a figure set apart. These early rulers are not kings, but they carry the shadow of kingship. They hold symbols of authority, perhaps staffs, perhaps crowns of woven cloth or reed. They are judges of quarrels, guardians of fields, but also figures of spiritual weight. They lead ceremonies when the river floods, when the harvest begins, when the sun reaches its highest. Their words echo with divine sanction, tying the people's faith to their authority. It is in this age that the land begins to divide itself into two regions, two identities shaped by geography and river. To the south, along the narrow valley where cliffs rise close to the Nile, lies Upper Egypt. Here, the river is strong and swift, hemmed in by desert on both sides. Its people claim the white crown, tall and conical, a mark of their rule and identity. To the north, where the Nile fans outward into wide green channels and marshes, lies Lower Egypt. This is the delta, rich and fertile, spreading like an open hand to the sea. Its people wear the red crown, flat and curved, with a tall extension rising behind. Two lands, bound by the same river, yet distinct. They share trade, for boats move along the water carrying grain, copper, turquoise, and beads. They share rituals, for the sun rises over both lands, and the river blesses them alike. Yet beneath this connection lies rivalry. For as towns become stronger, as chieftains grow in power, the question of who shall lead them all begins to whisper through the land. In the heart of these communities, ceremonies grow in grandeur. Drums sound in rhythm, echoing through the air. Dancers circle in patterns, their linen garments, simple, white, and fluttering in the breeze, catching the light. Incense rises in sweet smoke, drifting upward as prayers are spoken to the gods. The people call upon the river, upon the sun, upon the endless sky. They ask for the floods to return, for the fields to grow, for life to continue in balance. Shrines of wood and reed rise upon the riverbanks. Early temples, humble in their size, but sacred in their purpose. Here offerings are made, jars of grain, beads, small figures of clay. Perhaps, in the flicker of torchlight, chants echo against the walls. The sense of the divine grows stronger, woven into the fabric of daily life, guiding not only the seasons but the rule of men. The dead, too, are honored with greater care. Once buried in shallow graves with little ceremony, they are now laid to rest in tombs more elaborate, their bodies placed with jars of food, with jewelry, with weapons and tools. These offerings are gifts for the journey into the afterlife, an acknowledgement that death is not an end but a passage. Archaeologists believe this marks the deepening of belief, the shaping of a spiritual world that stretches beyond the horizon of life. Symbols emerge as well, carved into ivory tags, etched into stone. They are not yet the full script that will one day cover temple walls, but they are beginnings, signs that represent names, places, perhaps even ideas. These marks are the first breaths of writing, fragile yet enduring, like seeds planted in the dark earth. The sound of these growing towns is filled with life. The clang of copper against stone, the steady rhythm of grinding grain, the laughter of children at the water's edge, the soft lowing of cattle in the fields, and above it all, the call of a chieftain's voice, summoning his people to gather, to listen, to believe. Picture the ceremonies of uniting. People stand in circles, watching as their leader dons the white crown or the red. Drums throb, feet stamp upon the packed earth, voices rise and chant. The scent of incense drifts thick and sweet. The leader raises his arms, not only as a man of flesh and bone, but as the vessel of power, the one who speaks between people and the divine. And yet, even as the people celebrate, the river whispers of change. Two lands, two crowns, two centers of power cannot remain forever in harmony. Trade binds them, but ambition drives them. Rivalries grow, subtle at first, then stronger. The chieftains of Upper Egypt, with their narrow valley, seek the wealth of the delta. The rulers of Lower Egypt, with their broad fertile fields, seek the authority of the south. Tension rises like the river in flood, swelling silently, waiting to spill over. The Nakata culture, with its art, its tools, its rituals, is the foundation of what is to come. Each pot, each bead, each temple and tomb is a step upon the path towards something greater. Civilization is stirring. Kingship is on the horizon. As the sun sets upon these first kingdoms, casting the land in hues of red and gold, the people cannot yet know what awaits. But the river knows. The Nile has carried them from wandering hunters to settled farmers, from farmers to rulers, from rulers to kingdoms. And now, it carries them toward unification, toward the birth of a nation that will endure for thousands of years. For now, in the hush of twilight, incense smoke curls into the air, drums fade into silence, and the crowns of white and red rest upon the brows of rival rulers. The land waits, divided yet bound, fertile yet restless. Close your eyes and listen. The river flows steady. The drums echo faintly. The whispers of unification linger in the wind. Soon, the two lands will become one. The Nile glimmers beneath the dawn light. Its waters reflect the first hues of gold and rose as the sun climbs from the horizon. Along its banks, the voices of birds rise in chorus, a daily hymn to the coming day. The land is alive with anticipation. For what was once many towns, many chieftains, many crowns, is about to be bound into one. For centuries, Upper and Lower Egypt had lived side by side. To the south, the narrow valley of Upper Egypt, its fields pressed tight between cliffs and river, proud in its white crown. To the north, the wide and fertile delta, lush and abundant, crowned in red. Both lands shared the river's lifeblood, yet both carried ambitions of their own. Rivalries flickered like sparks, sometimes subdued by trade, sometimes sharpened by pride. But among these rival rulers, one figure began to rise above the rest. His name was Narmer, remembered by some as Menes, a leader from the south whose vision reached far beyond the boundaries of his own valley. Archaeologists believe he sought not merely to rule, but to unite. Not to stand as one crown against another, but to bind both under a single rule, a single spirit, a single eternal land. The memory of his triumph lives in stone. The Narmer palette, carved more than 5,000 years ago, shows his story. On one side, he wears the tall white crown of Upper Egypt, lifting a mace high above a kneeling foe, while the falcon god Horus watches over him. On the other, he wears the flat red crown of Lower Egypt, leading a procession of standards, walking in majesty as his enemies lie fallen before him. In this image, Narmer is not only a man of power, but a figure chosen by the gods, carrying their blessing as he brings two worlds into one. Imagine the day of unification. The rising sun warms the river, its light flashing on polished stone. Priests gather before shrines, their linen garments white and pure, fluttering in the breeze. Incense smolders in clay burners, its sweet smoke curling into the morning sky. Drums echo slowly, a heartbeat for the ceremony. Horns sound deep and low, their notes carrying across the plain. Narmer stands tall before his people. His body glows in the light of dawn, bronze skin shining, adorned with a simple linen kilt, with ornaments of gold and turquoise glinting at his wrists and throat. First he dons the tall white crown of Upper Egypt. The crowd bows, for this is the mark of his home, the crown of his inheritance. Then as silence falls, he lifts the red crown of Lower Egypt, flat and curving, with its high stalk rising behind. He places it upon his head, and the people murmur in awe. For in this moment, two crowns become one. The priests chant hymns to the river, to the sun, to the falcon Horus who hovers in spirit above the king. Their voices rise and fall, steady as waves. They pour libations of water upon the earth, gifts to the land that has given them all life. They lift their arms to the sky, praising the God who shines as Ra, praising the balance that Narmer has brought. The people too join in reverence. Farmers bow their heads, fishermen kneel, Women raise their children high so that they may see the moment, remember it, carry it forward. For today, Egypt is no longer two lands divided. It is one. Archaeologists believe the ceremony marked not only a political union, but the birth of a new idea, the pharaoh. For Narmer was not merely a chieftain, not merely a conqueror. He was now the embodiment of Ma'at, the divine order of balance, harmony, and justice. His body was mortal, but his role was eternal, bridging the human and the divine. To the people, he became the living god, the earthly vessel of the god's will. With unification, a new crown was born. The skent, the double crown, blending the tall white of the south with the flat red of the north. When Narmer placed it upon his brow, he was no longer a ruler of one valley or one delta. He was king of Kemet, lord of the Black Land from cataract to sea. His authority flowed as wide as the Nile itself, binding villages and towns, farmers and fishermen, craftsmen and priests into one people. Picture the procession that followed. Narmer walks at the head, his steps slow, deliberate, filled with the weight of eternity. Behind him march standard-bearers carrying banners adorned with sacred animals, the falcon, the bull, the jackal. Musicians beat drums in steady rhythm. Trumpets blare in bright bursts. Women throw flowers of papyrus and lotus into the path. The air is thick with the fragrance of incense, with the sound of chants rising like a tide. At the center of the procession is the king, wearing both crowns, holding a mace in one hand and a scepter in the other. These are the symbols of his power, strength and guidance, force and wisdom. Around him, soldiers walk in disciplined lines, their copper weapons gleaming in the sun. But more than soldiers, there are priests, craftsmen, farmers, all united in celebration. As the day unfolds, offerings are made in temples newly dedicated to the gods of a united land. Jars of grain, baskets of fish, golden ornaments, and carved figures are laid before the shrines. The falcon of Horus, the son of Ra, the river itself, all are praised for blessing the union. At dusk, when the sky turns deep crimson and the air cools, Narmer sits upon a throne raised above his people. The throne is simple yet mighty, carved of wood, adorned with ivory inlays. Upon it, he is more than a man. He is Pharaoh, the first of a line that will stretch across centuries, a tradition that will define Egypt's heart. The people feast that night. Fires glow in the darkness, music rings through the air. Dancers move in circles, their shadows flickering against the firelight. Children laugh, elders speak in wonder. The Nile reflects the stars above, carrying their light along its eternal current. Yet beneath the joy lies something deeper. For this day is not only celebration, it is transformation. Egypt has stepped from the age of chieftains into the age of kings, from the quiet rhythm of villages into the great symphony of a nation. In the quiet that follows the feast, one can almost hear the whisper of what is to come. Temples of stone will rise. Tombs will grow grander. Art, language, and order will flourish. The pharaoh will stand as the axis of the world, the center of life and death, of earth and sky. From Narmer's crown will flow dynasties, centuries of power, an unbroken chain of rule and ritual. But on this first day, all is still new. The people look to their king with wonder. The priests chant blessings. The river flows steady, as it has for ages, and the double crown gleams in the firelight, a symbol of unity, of harmony, of destiny. Close your eyes now, and see it in your mind's eye. The polished stone of the Narmer palette, the glint of copper weapons in sunlight, the fragrance of incense curling upward, the murmur of voices rising in devotion, the warmth of the sun upon the land, binding north and south in one eternal embrace. This is the moment Egypt was born as a nation, the unification of the two lands under Narmer, under the double crown, under the eternal Nile. From this day forward, Egypt would rise into greatness, its foundations firm, its spirit unbroken, its destiny stretching beyond the horizon of time. And soon, from this moment, will rise the old kingdom, the first golden age of the pharaohs. The two lands are one now. A single Egypt, bound by the Nile, guided by the pharaoh. The white crown and the red crown have joined as one, forming the double crown that gleams in the sunlight. And from this union rises an age of grandeur, remembered as the Old Kingdom, the first golden age of Egypt, when men built for eternity. The pharaoh now stands not only as ruler, but as the very embodiment of the divine. He is Horus upon earth, the falcon soaring between heaven and land. He is the guardian of Ma'at, order, balance, justice, and harmony. His life is not only his own, but the breath of his people, the vessel of their gods, the axis between the mortal world and the eternal. When he speaks, it is the voice of the divine. When he acts, it is the will of the heavens. In this sacred role, the pharaoh must ensure the floods come, the crops grow, the people flourish. But he must also prepare for his own journey beyond life. For death is not an end, it is a passage, a crossing into eternity. And so, to honor both the gods and their kings, the people begin to build monuments unlike anything the world had ever seen. The first great step is taken by Pharaoh Djoser. Around 2700 BCE, he rules from Memphis, where the river narrows into the delta. By his side is a man whose genius will echo through the ages, Imhotep, his architect, priest, and healer. Together, they envision something that had never before been attempted, a tomb not of mud brick, but of stone. At Saqqara, under the hot Egyptian sun, Imhotep designs the step pyramid. Layer upon layer of limestone blocks rise into the sky, 6 tiers stacked one upon another, a stairway of stone reaching toward eternity. Workers, thousands of them, carve and haul the heavy blocks, their songs rising as rhythm to their labor. Priests walk among them, offering prayers to Ra, the sun god, asking that their work be blessed. The pyramid gleams pale against the desert, its steps catching the golden light of dawn and dusk. This is more than a tomb. It is a promise that the pharaoh, even in death, will ascend to the sky, joining the gods forever. The vision of Djoser and Imhotep ignites an age of builders. After him comes Sneferu, a king whose reign is filled with experiments in stone. At Dahshur, he orders a pyramid to rise, but its sides are steep, too heavy, and as the structure grows, cracks begin to spread. The builders change their plan, softening the angle, leaving behind what we now call the bent pyramid, its slopes shifting midway, its shape unlike any other. Yet Sneferu is not discouraged. He commands another pyramid, this time with lessons learned. The red pyramid, with sides smooth and perfect, rises into the sky. Its limestone surface glows warm in the sun, a monument to determination and vision. Here, for the first time, the true pyramid form is born, smooth-sided, pointing to the heavens like a ray of light frozen in stone. And then comes Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, whose ambition reaches higher still. At Giza, on the west bank of the Nile, he commands the building of a pyramid so vast, so perfect, that it will endure for millennia. The Great Pyramid. The scale is unimaginable. Archaeologists believe more than 2 million blocks of limestone were cut, hauled, and set into place. Some weigh as much as 50 tons, their edges fitted so precisely that even the blade of a knife can scarcely slip between them. The work spans decades, a labor of generations. Picture the scene. Along the river, boats glide with loads of stone quarried upriver. Workers haul blocks up ramps, their bodies glistening with sweat, voices raised in rhythmic chant to keep time. Overseers guide the lines of men, their calls carried in the dry air. Priests stand at altars nearby, incense curling in fragrant spirals, hymns rising to the sun. Women bring bread and beer to feed the laborers. Children watch in awe as the pyramid grows, higher, higher, until it touches the very sky. When finished, the Great Pyramid gleams white, its surface once covered in polished limestone casing stones, shining like a beacon beneath the sun. It is not merely a tomb. It is a mountain of eternity, a stairway for the soul of Khufu to ascend to Ra, to join the eternal cycle of the heavens. Khufu is followed by Khafre, who builds his own pyramid beside his father's, smaller yet still mighty. At its foot lies the Great Sphinx, carved from living rock, the body of a lion, the face of a king. Its gaze stretches eastward, watching the rising sun each day, guarding the tombs, guarding the horizon. Beside him, Menkaure builds his pyramid too, smaller but no less grand, completing the trio that stands eternal on the plateau of Giza. Together, they are the heartbeat of the Old Kingdom, symbols of divine kingship, of eternal faith, of the strength of a nation bound to its pharaoh. But Egypt is not only pyramids. Beneath their shadow, daily life flows like the Nile itself. Farmers till the black land with wooden plows, guiding cattle across the fields, sowing seeds in the rich soil left by the floods. Their harvest feeds the workers, the scribes, the priests. Scribes sit cross-legged in the shade, brushes of reed in hand, inked in black and red, writing upon sheets of papyrus. They record the gifts to the temples, the work of the fields, the orders of the pharaoh. Their words, though simple in form, are the lifeblood of order, keeping balance across the land. Artisans labor in workshops, carving alabaster jars, shaping copper tools, chiseling statues of kings and gods. The air rings with the sound of hammer upon stone, with the scrape of chisel, with the murmur of voices at work. In the courtyards of homes, women grind grain on stone querns, the smell of fresh bread rising with the heat of the sun. Children laugh as they play along the river's edge, their voices carrying with the breeze. The Old Kingdom is a world of harmony, where each person has a role, where every act is part of Ma'at. The farmer tends the earth, the scribe tends the word, the artisan tends the form, the priest tends the spirit, the pharaoh tends the order of all. In this rhythm, Egypt flourishes. Yet even in golden ages, shadows linger. The building of pyramids demands immense resources. Grain must feed the workers, stone must be quarried and hauled, wealth must be gathered from across the land. Local nobles, once humble servants of the crown, grow stronger as they manage the work, as they oversee the fields and storehouses. Their voices carry more weight, their ambitions grow more bold. And sometimes the Nile fails. The floods come too low, leaving the fields dry, the harvest poor. When this happens, the people murmur with unease. For the pharaoh is guardian of Ma'at, the keeper of balance. If the river falters, do the gods falter with him? These whispers are faint for now, carried like dust upon the wind. The old kingdom still glows bright, still sings with strength. The pyramids stand fresh and shining. The pharaohs are honored as gods. The people find peace in the rhythm of the land. Yet in the distance, the harmony trembles, ever so slightly, as though the future stirs with uncertainty. For Egypt's golden rhythm will not last unbroken. The weight of its monuments, the power of its nobles, the caprice of the Nile, all will soon test the strength of Maat. But tonight, under the stars, all is still. The pyramids gleam beneath the moonlight, their edges sharp against the sky. The Sphinx watches silently, eyes fixed upon eternity. The Nile flows steady, carrying the reflection of the heavens upon its dark surface. The land breathes in balance. Close your eyes and imagine it. The warmth of the sun on white limestone. The chant of priests echoing in a temple courtyard. The smell of incense, of fresh bread, of wet earth after the flood. The steady pulse of life, ordered, eternal. This is the Old Kingdom, Egypt's first golden age, the time of builders of eternity. The pyramids still gleamed under the sun, their sharp edges cutting against the sky. But behind their grandeur, Egypt trembled. What had once seemed eternal, the steady rhythm of the Nile, the unshakable rule of the pharaoh, the harmony of Maat, began to falter. The Old Kingdom's golden rhythm, built on faith and stone, carried a heavy cost. Each pyramid had demanded the labor of thousands, the resources of entire provinces, and the wealth of harvests gathered year after year. As the monuments grew, so too did the strain. Local nobles, once loyal stewards of the king's will, became powerful in their own right. They held the granaries, commanded the workers, and guarded the wealth of their districts. Pharaoh's hands stretched thinner across the land, his voice less certain, his authority weakened. And then the river began to betray them. The Nile, eternal lifeblood of Egypt, sometimes rose too little, leaving the fields dry, the soil cracked, the harvest poor. When this happened once, the people endured. But when it happened again and again, hunger spread like a shadow. The floods no longer brought abundance but fear. Children cried at empty bowls. Villages whispered in unease. Priests prayed with fervor, yet the waters did not always answer. Imagine the fields under a pitiless sun. The earth baked hard, fissured and dry. Cattle thin, ribs showing. Farmers walked the lines of dust where once grain had swayed, their eyes searching the horizon in vain. A hot wind stirs, carrying the hiss of sand across the barren land. Egypt without balance became a land divided. No longer was there one pharaoh strong enough to bind the two lands together. Instead, local lords guarded their own territories, ruling as small kings over towns and provinces. Some sought peace. Others sought power. Armies of neighbors clashed at the borders of fields, each claiming authority, each seizing what little the Nile had given. It was a time of fragmentation, of Egypt splintered into pieces. The once unifying symbol of the double crown seemed only a memory. From this age come voices of lament. In later writings, such as the Admonitions of Power, we hear echoes of despair. Words that speak of a world upside down. The poor becoming rich, the rich becoming poor, chaos walking where order once dwelled. Perhaps these laments are poetry, perhaps memory, perhaps both. Yet they carry the weight of sorrow. The river is blood, yet men drink of it. The land turns round like a potter's wheel. The noble laments, the humble rejoices. Nothing is as it was. These words remind us how deeply the people felt the loss of Maat. For when the river failed, when hunger spread, it seemed as though the gods themselves had turned away. Yet even in chaos, life did not cease. Farmers still bent their backs to the soil, planting seeds with hope that the flood might return. Artisans still shaped pottery, their hands steady on the clay wheel. Priests still tended shrines, their chants rising into the sky, carrying prayers for renewal. Families gathered by small fires at night, sharing what little food they had, whispering stories to comfort their children. Even in hardship, the rhythm of life clung to the river, refusing to let go. In Upper Egypt, the city of Thebes began to rise in prominence. Far from the chaos of the Delta, Theban leaders gathered strength, ruling with a vision that looked beyond survival. They offered stability, order, and the promise of renewal. Slowly, their power grew, their reach extending along the Nile's valley. Among them would come a man who would change Egypt's fate, Mentuhotep II. Born of Thebes, Mentuhotep inherited a land still fractured, still weakened by generations of division. Yet his vision was greater than his rivals. He saw not just Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt, but the dream of both once again bound as one. He gathered his armies, his priests, his scribes, and set forth to restore the two lands. The struggle was long, marked by battles and shifting loyalties. Archaeologists believe Mentuhotep fought for years, slowly extending his control northward, defeating rival rulers, breaking through the divisions that had splintered the land. His victories were not only of war, but of spirit. For with each conquest, he carried the message of unity, of Maat restored. At last, around 2050 BCE, he triumphed. The crowns of white and red returned to a single brow. Egypt, weary of hunger, weary of war, weary of disunity, was whole again. Imagine the moment of his victory. The Nile, after years of unreliable floods, swells once more with life. Priests chant in Thebes, their voices steady and strong, praising the gods for restoring harmony. Farmers look upon fields filling with water, their hearts lifting with hope. Children laugh again, their bowls filled with grain. And upon a throne in Thebes, Mentuhotep II dons the double crown, his figure radiant in the dawn light. He is hailed as a new Horus, a bringer of balance, the restorer of order. His reign marks the beginning of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, an age of renewal born from the ashes of despair. The first intermediate period, though remembered as a time of chaos, was not only darkness. It was a time of survival, of resilience, of the people's stubborn faith in the river, in the gods, in the hope that Maat would one day return. Though the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom had fallen, the spirit of Egypt endured, carried in the prayers of farmers, the hands of artisans, the devotion of priests, and the vision of Thebes. Close your eyes and feel it, the dry wind over cracked fields, the hush of empty granaries, the faint smoke of small fires glowing in the night. And then the slow return of water, the laughter of children, the chant of priests, the rising of the sun upon a land made whole again. From chaos, Egypt was reborn. From division, unity. From despair, renewal. The Middle Kingdom awaited, and with it, another chapter in the eternal story of the Nile. And sometimes the Nile fails. The floods come too low, leaving the fields dry, the harvest poor. When this happens, the people murmur with unease. For the pharaoh is guardian of Maat, the keeper of balance. If the river falters, do the gods falter with him? These whispers are faint for now, carried like dust upon the wind. The Old Kingdom still glows bright, still sings with strength. The pyramids stand fresh and shining. The pharaohs are honored as gods. The people find peace in the rhythm of the land. Yet in the distance, the harmony trembles, ever so slightly, as though the future stirs with uncertainty. For Egypt's golden rhythm will not last unbroken. The weight of its monuments, the power of its nobles, the caprice of the Nile, all will soon test the strength of Maat. But tonight, under the stars, all is still. The pyramids gleam beneath the moonlight, their edges sharp against the sky. The Sphinx watches silently, eyes fixed upon eternity. The Nile flows steady, carrying the reflection of the heavens upon its dark surface. The land breathes in balance. Close your eyes and imagine it. The warmth of the sun on white limestone. The chant of priests echoing in a temple courtyard. The smell of incense, of fresh bread, of wet earth after the flood. The steady pulse of life, ordered, eternal. This is the Old Kingdom, Egypt's first golden age, the time of builders of eternity. The pyramids still gleamed under the sun, their sharp edges cutting against the sky. But behind their grandeur, Egypt trembled. What had once seemed eternal, the steady rhythm of the Nile, the unshakable rule of the pharaoh, the harmony of Maat, began to falter. The Old Kingdom's golden rhythm, built on faith and stone, carried a heavy cost. Each pyramid had demanded the labor of thousands, the resources of entire provinces, and the wealth of harvests gathered year after year. As the monuments grew, so too did the strain. Local nobles, once loyal stewards of the king's will, became powerful in their own right. They held the granaries, commanded the workers, and guarded the wealth of their districts. Pharaoh's hands stretched thinner across the land, his voice less certain, his authority weakened. And then the river began to betray them. The Nile, eternal lifeblood of Egypt, sometimes rose too little, leaving the fields dry, the soil cracked, the harvest poor. When this happened once, the people endured. But when it happened again and again, hunger spread like a shadow. The floods no longer brought abundance but fear. Children cried at empty bowls. Villages whispered in unease. Priests prayed with fervor, yet the waters did not always answer. Imagine the fields under a pitiless sun. The earth baked hard, fissured and dry. Cattle thin, ribs showing. Farmers walked the lines of dust where once grain had swayed, their eyes searching the horizon in vain. A hot wind stirs, carrying the hiss of sand across the barren land. Egypt without balance became a land divided. No longer was there one pharaoh strong enough to bind the two lands together. Instead, local lords guarded their own territories, ruling as small kings over towns and provinces. Some sought peace. Others sought power. Armies of neighbors clashed at the borders of fields, each claiming authority, each seizing what little the Nile had given. It was a time of fragmentation, of Egypt splintered into pieces. The once unifying symbol of the double crown seemed only a memory. From this age come voices of lament. In later writings, such as the Admonitions of Power, we hear echoes of despair. Words that speak of a world upside down. The poor becoming rich, the rich becoming poor, chaos walking where order once dwelled. Perhaps these laments are poetry, perhaps memory, perhaps both. Yet they carry the weight of sorrow. The river is blood, yet men drink of it. The land turns round like a potter's wheel. The noble laments, the humble rejoices. Nothing is as it was. These words remind us how deeply the people felt the loss of Maat. For when the river failed, when hunger spread, it seemed as though the gods themselves had turned away. Yet even in chaos, life did not cease. Farmers still bent their backs to the soil, planting seeds with hope that the flood might return. Artisans still shaped pottery, their hands steady on the clay wheel. Priests still tended shrines, their chants rising into the sky, carrying prayers for renewal. Families gathered by small fires at night, sharing what little food they had, whispering stories to comfort their children. Even in hardship, the rhythm of life clung to the river, refusing to let go. In Upper Egypt, the city of Thebes began to rise in prominence. Far from the chaos of the Delta, Theban leaders gathered strength, ruling with a vision that looked beyond survival. They offered stability, order, and the promise of renewal. Slowly, their power grew, their reach extending along the Nile's valley. Among them would come a man who would change Egypt's fate, Mentuhotep II. Born of Thebes, Mentuhotep inherited a land still fractured, still weakened by generations of division. Yet his vision was greater than his rivals. He saw not just Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt, but the dream of both once again bound as one. He gathered his armies, his priests, his scribes, and set forth to restore the two lands. The struggle was long, marked by battles and shifting loyalties. Archaeologists believe Mentuhotep fought for years, slowly extending his control northward, defeating rival rulers, breaking through the divisions that had splintered the land. His victories were not only of war, but of spirit. For with each conquest, he carried the message of unity, of Maat restored. At last, around 2050 BCE, he triumphed. The crowns of white and red returned to a single brow. Egypt, weary of hunger, weary of war, weary of disunity, was whole again. Imagine the moment of his victory. The Nile, after years of unreliable floods, swells once more with life. Priests chant in Thebes, their voices steady and strong, praising the gods for restoring harmony. Farmers look upon fields filling with water, their hearts lifting with hope. Children laugh again, their bowls filled with grain. And upon a throne in Thebes, Mentuhotep II dons the double crown, his figure radiant in the dawn light. He is hailed as a new Horus, a bringer of balance, the restorer of order. His reign marks the beginning of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, an age of renewal born from the ashes of despair. The first intermediate period, though remembered as a time of chaos, was not only darkness. It was a time of survival, of resilience, of the people's stubborn faith in the river, in the gods, in the hope that Maat would one day return. Though the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom had fallen, the spirit of Egypt endured, carried in the prayers of farmers, the hands of artisans, the devotion of priests, and the vision of Thebes. Close your eyes and feel it. The dry wind over cracked fields, the hush of empty granaries, the faint smoke of small fires glowing in the night. And then, the slow return of water, the laughter of children, the chant of priests, the rising of the sun upon a land made whole again. From chaos, Egypt was reborn. From division, unity. From despair, renewal. The Middle Kingdom awaited, and with it, another chapter in the eternal story of the Nile. The chaos has passed. Egypt, long fractured and weary, stands once again whole. Under Mentuhotep II of Thebes, the crowns of white and red rest upon a single brow, and the Nile flows steady, bringing its gift of life to a land reborn. The Middle Kingdom begins, an age not of towering pyramids alone, but of wisdom, humility, and renewal. The pharaohs of this time are different from those of the Old Kingdom. They are not distant gods upon high thrones, untouchable and remote. They are shepherds of their people, guardians of justice, protectors of the humble as well as the noble. They embody the same divine order, Maat, yet their rule carries the tone of compassion, of responsibility, of care. The river returns to its rhythm. Each year, the waters swell and spread, retreat and recede, leaving behind fields of black earth rich with promise. Farmers step once more into moist furrows, scattering barley and wheat, their hopes high as stalks rise green and full. At harvest, the granaries overflow, their air heavy with the warm scent of grain. In villages, bread is baked, beer brewed, cattle fattened, and children play freely in the sunlight, laughter echoing across the land. Markets awaken too. In towns along the Nile, stalls brim with woven linen, baskets of dates, jars of honey, and fish fresh from the river. Merchants barter, scribes tally goods upon papyrus, voices rise in cheerful rhythm. Boats glide upon the water, sails puffed with the breeze, carrying copper from Sinai, gold from Nubia, incense from the far deserts, gemstones that glimmer in the light. Egypt is not only united, it is alive with abundance. From this foundation of peace, a new dynasty takes shape. Around 1990 BCE, Amenemhat rises to power. To strengthen his hold, he moves the capital northward, closer to the delta, founding a new city at Ichtai. From there, he can watch both Upper and Lower Egypt, binding them with his presence. His rule marks the beginning of the 12th dynasty, remembered as a time of strength and wisdom. After him, Senusret III becomes one of the most renowned pharaohs of this age. His reign is firm, disciplined, and watchful. He looks to Egypt's borders, where threats may stir, and along the southern frontier he builds mighty fortresses. At Semna and Buhan, stone walls rise, towers and gates standing guard over the Nile's narrow corridors into Nubia. Soldiers march in the heat, their shields bright, their voices chanting in unison. The pharaoh ensures Egypt is safe, its wealth protected, its power secure. Yet Senusret is remembered not only as warrior, but as wise shepherd. His statues show him with a face lined, eyes deep, mouth firm, the weariness of responsibility etched upon his features. These are not the idealized faces of timeless gods. These are human faces, burdened, enduring, compassionate. The pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom is not distant. He is near, present, carrying the cares of his people upon his shoulders. Beyond borders, Egypt reaches outward. Expeditions venture into the deserts, to mines of turquoise and copper, to quarries of limestone and alabaster. Ships sail down the Red Sea, their sails catching the wind, to lands of incense and exotic treasures. Caravans cross dry sands, their camels laden with gold, ivory, ebony, and fragrant resins. Egypt in this age is not closed upon itself but open, reaching far for the gifts of distant horizons. In the temples, devotion deepens. At Karnak, near Thebes, the first stones of what will one day be a vast complex are raised. Pillars rise to catch the sun, their surfaces carved with prayers, their shadows cool and solemn. Priests chant hymns in courtyards, their voices echoing against stone, their incense curling into the morning air. The god Ammonius begins to rise in prominence, his name whispered alongside Ra, his image carried in processions as the hidden one, the mysterious breath of creation. And in the courts and homes, a flowering of words emerges. Stories are written not only to record but to inspire, to teach, to comfort. The tale of Sinuf tells of a man who flees Egypt, lives in foreign lands, and longs always to return home, until at last he is welcomed back, forgiven and honored. In its verses, we hear the human heart, its fear, its yearning, its hope for belonging. Wisdom texts, too, are written, offering guidance for living. How to be just, how to be humble, how to walk in harmony with Ma'at. These words survive across ages, their quiet wisdom flowing like the Nile itself. Art, too, takes new form. Statues of pharaohs are not only divine symbols but human portraits. Their faces carry lines of care, their eyes gaze with thought, their mouths curve in solemn strength. Reliefs show scenes of daily life, farmers plowing, fishermen casting nets, artisans shaping stone. Celebrations not only of kings, but of the people who sustain the land. Jewelry gleams with gold and turquoise, crafted with patience, shimmering in sunlight as families pass them down through generations. Step into a village of the Middle Kingdom. The air smells of baking bread, warm and earthy. Women grind grain at stone querns, their hands steady in rhythm. Children chase goats between houses of mud brick, their laughter bright. Scribes sit in shaded courtyards, brushes in hand, recording words upon papyrus sheets, copying tales to preserve them for the future. In workshops, artisans carve delicate jars from alabaster, their chisels tapping, their eyes fixed upon detail. Along the river, boats arrive and depart, laden with goods, their sails white against the blue. Life feels balanced, orderly, nourished by the river and guided by the shepherd kings. Through these centuries, Egypt thrives. The scars of famine and chaos fade, replaced by stability, prosperity, and gentle confidence. The land remembers suffering, yet now tastes the sweetness of balance restored. Pharaohs guard their people not only with might, but with care. The people see in them not remote gods, but fathers, shepherds, voices of justice. And still the Nile flows. Its floods return in rhythm, swelling and receding as though to reassure the people that Ma'at endures. Crops rise tall and green, bending heavy with grain. Granaries fill, their doors sealed tight, their shadows cool. In the evenings, families gather in courtyards, the air filled with the crackle of small fires, the murmur of prayers, the glow of lamps. Children listen as stories are told, the stories of kings, of gods, of ancestors who endured. Yet even in this balance, change stirs quietly. The cost of guarding borders grows heavy. Expeditions demand wealth, soldiers labor. Nobles hold power in their provinces, their voices sometimes louder than the court. And beyond Egypt's edges, new peoples rise, their eyes turning toward the riches of the Black Land. For now, though, the Middle Kingdom glows with strength. Its rulers walk as shepherds, its people thrive in harmony. Its temples ring with chants, its literature sings with wisdom. Egypt has been reborn, and its voice echoes strong across the desert winds. Close your eyes and hear it, the scrape of chisels on stone, the murmur of scribes at work, the creak of boats along the river, the hum of prayers in temple courts. Smell the warm grain in granaries, the resin of incense, the sweetness of dates in the market. See the shimmer of jewelry in sunlight, the faces of pharaohs lined with care, the floodwaters glistening upon black earth. This is the Middle Kingdom, the age of rebirth, of renewal, of shepherd kings. From hardship, Egypt found its balance again. Yet beyond the horizon, new challenges will rise, both from within and from strangers approaching Egypt's sacred borders. The Middle Kingdom had been an age of rebirth, of shepherd kings guiding their people with wisdom and care. But no age endures forever. Slowly, the center began to weaken. Pharaohs no longer held their grip as firmly as before. Local nobles, once obedient to the throne, began to stretch their own power, managing their provinces with greater independence. In the corridors of the court, whispers stirred of rivals, of shifting loyalties, of the weight of distant provinces drifting beyond the pharaoh's reach. The Nile still flowed, and life still went on. Farmers still planted in black earth. Artisans still shaped alabaster and copper. Priests still lit incense in temple courtyards. Yet beneath the steady rhythm of daily life, Egypt's unity was loosening, as though the river's current itself had begun to divide. And from the northeast, new footsteps began to enter the land. They came first as traders, carrying goods along the desert roads, their donkeys laden with oils, wool, and resin. Their speech was different, their clothes unfamiliar, their ways distinct. Yet trade welcomed all, and the markets of the delta opened to them. Over time, these foreigners, remembered as the Hyksos, settled in the delta's fertile marshes. They built homes, raised families, and tended fields beside Egyptian neighbors. But as the years passed, their presence grew stronger. They gathered wealth, drew more of their kin from beyond Egypt's borders, and began to claim authority over the delta. What began as settlement slowly hardened into rule. At Avaris, in the eastern delta, they built their capital. From there, their leaders took titles of pharaoh, wore the crowns, and invoked Egyptian gods, as though to cloak themselves in the traditions of the land they now commanded. Yet for all their outward imitation, the Egyptians still saw them as strangers, foreigners in their own land. The Hyksos brought with them tools and weapons the Egyptians had not known before. Horses, swift and strong, their hooves striking the earth with thunder. Chariots of wood and leather, light and fast, wheels creaking as they turned across the plains. Bows of composite wood, powerful and precise, arrows flying farther than those of reed and flint. Bronze weapons that gleamed in the sun, their edges sharp and enduring. To the Egyptians of the time, these were wonders and threats. For in their hands, the Hyksos held a power that was new, unfamiliar, and difficult to match. Yet the Hyksos did not destroy Egyptian culture. Instead, they adopted much of it. They prayed to Egyptian gods, building temples to Ra and Osiris. They took Egyptian names and royal titles, placing themselves in the long chain of pharaohs. They commissioned artisans to carve statues in Egyptian form, to write in hieroglyphs, to build in the style of the land. And yet, despite this, they remained apart. Their faces, their tongues, their ways, still foreign, still other. The Egyptians, proud of their heritage, never forgot that the crowns rested upon strangers' brows. Egypt was divided now. In the north, Hyksos rulers held the delta, their banners flying over Avaris. In the south, in Thebes, Egyptian kings still claimed the title of pharaoh, though their power was limited. The two lands were once more split, not by geography alone, but by the presence of outsiders upon the throne. Daily life, however, continued. Farmers still bent to their tasks, planting barley and wheat. In towns, marketplaces still rang with voices, traders selling fish, linen, and pottery. In temples, priests still chanted their hymns, lit their lamps, and carried offerings to the gods. But beneath it all ran an undercurrent of unease, a quiet tension that hummed like a low drum. For Egypt was not whole, and in every prayer there lingered the hope of restoration. From Thebes, resistance began to stir. The rulers of the south watched the Hyksos with wary eyes. They honored the gods, they tended their temples, but they also sharpened their spears and gathered their strength. It was from these Theban kings that a dream of liberation would grow. Seqenenretau was among the first to rise. His reign, though short, was marked by defiance. He resisted Hyksos authority, perhaps in tribute, perhaps in arms. His struggle ended violently. His skull, discovered millennia later, bears wounds deep and brutal, the marks of battle against northern foes. His sacrifice, though tragic, lit the flame of resistance stronger still. After him came Kamose, another Theban king. His voice was fierce, his will resolute. He launched campaigns against the Hyksos, striking at their outposts, disrupting their power. His words survive in inscriptions, burning with anger at the foreigners who dared to rule Egypt. He did not live to see their defeat, but his fight carried the dream forward. And then came Ahmose, a name that would shine bright in Egypt's memory. He gathered armies, wielded the new tools of war, and led his people in final defiance. His campaigns would drive the Hyksos from avarice, from the Delta, from Egypt itself. His victories would close this time of division and open the gates to Egypt's greatest era, the New Kingdom, an age of empire and glory. But that is yet to come. For now, imagine Egypt in the time of the Hyksos. The Delta alive with markets, foreigners, and Egyptians mingling. The sound of hooves upon packed earth, the creak of chariots rolling through city gates. Bronze blades glinting at the belts of guards. Farmers kneeling in fields of black soil, scattering seeds, their prayers rising to the gods of flood and sun. Priests burning incense in smoky temples, their voices steady, asking for balance to return. The land endures, as it always has. Even in division, even under foreign crowns, Egypt breathes with the rhythm of the Nile. The river does not care who rules, only that its waters rise and fall. And the people, bound to its rhythm, continue their lives, waiting, hoping, believing that Ma'at will one day be restored. Close your eyes and feel the hum of that divided land, the gleam of bronze under the sun, the scent of smoke rising from village hearths, the voices of merchants in crowded markets, the quiet determination in Thebes, where kings sharpen their blades and whisper of freedom. The second intermediate period is an age of strangers, of division, of tension. Yet from its struggle will rise renewal. Soon, the sons of Thebes will march north, and Egypt will be reborn into its mightiest age, the New Kingdom. The Hyksos are gone. Their chariots and foreign crowns have been driven from the Delta, their stronghold at Avarice taken, their banners lowered. From Thebes, Pharaoh Ahmose rises as the restorer, the liberator, the king who has reclaimed the two lands. Egypt is whole again, and stronger than before. The long struggle of resistance has forged a new fire. Out of division is born ambition, and out of survival comes glory. Thus begins the New Kingdom, the radiant height of Egypt's story, an age when the pharaohs expand their power beyond their borders, when temples rise like mountains of stone, when gold flows in endless streams, and when Egypt stands at the very center of the world it knows. With victory over the Hyksos came lessons. The horses, the chariots, the weapons of bronze, all once foreign, now belonged to Egypt too. Pharaohs took these tools and wielded them with unmatched skill, transforming Egypt into a nation of warriors as well as builders. Armies marched forth from the Nile Valley, not only to defend but to conquer, carrying the falcon standard across deserts and mountains into Nubia, Canaan, and Syria. Pharaoh Thutmose leads campaigns into Nubia, his soldiers sailing south upon the Nile, their spears glinting in the sun. Beyond the cataracts, they clash with warriors who guard lands rich in gold, ebony, ivory, and precious stone. With victory, Nubia falls under Egypt's sway, its wealth flowing northward in tribute. Later, Thutmose III, remembered as the great warrior pharaoh, leads his armies farther still. His campaigns carry Egyptian banners deep into the Levant, even to the fields of Megiddo, where he triumphs after a daring march through narrow passes. His victories bring chariots, horses, and treasure, filling Egypt's temples and palaces with spoils from distant lands. Tribute flows like the Nile itself, gold from Nubia, incense from Punt, lapis and turquoise from far mountains, Exotic animals led in processions to astonish the crowds: giraffes, monkeys, and leopards. Egypt becomes not just a kingdom, but an empire, radiant and supreme. Yet Egypt's greatness is not only of war, but of vision. Among its rulers rises one who changes the image of kingship itself, a woman who dons the crowns of Pharaoh. Her name is Hatshepsut. As regent for her stepson, she might have ruled quietly, but her ambition is vast, her will unshakable. She takes the throne not as queen, but as king. She is shown in statues with the beard of Pharaoh, clothed in royal regalia, her authority unquestioned. She rules with wisdom and confidence, expanding trade, enriching temples, commissioning works that dazzle the ages. At Deir el-Bahari, on the cliffs west of Thebes, her mortuary temple rises like terraces of light, colonnades stretching upward in harmony with the mountains. Painted reliefs within show her grand expedition to Punt, a land of incense and wonder. Ships set sail down the Red Sea, returning laden with myrrh trees, gold, and fragrant resins. In every corner, her reign breathes prosperity. She is remembered not as usurper, but as visionary, her legacy carved into stone that still endures. After her, the line of warrior kings continues, but in time, Egypt finds peace again, and with peace comes splendor. Under Amenhotep III, Egypt stands at the height of wealth and majesty. His reign is long, prosperous, radiant. He raises temples vast and luminous, their columns rising like forests of stone. Colossal statues are carved in his image, seated upon thrones, gazing serenely over the floodplains. His court glitters with gold, with jewels, with foreign envoys bringing tribute and gifts. The air in this age is thick with incense, with the music of harps and flutes, with the murmur of prayers in temples whose walls gleam with painted reliefs. Life flourishes in villages and cities alike. Farmers reap abundant harvests, artisans carve statues of gods and kings, jewelers set turquoise into delicate necklaces, scribes copy tales and wisdom onto scrolls of papyrus. The Nile, steady and generous, seems to sing with Egypt's confidence. Yet within this golden glow arises a voice of change. Amenhotep IV, who later calls himself Akhenaten, turns from the gods of tradition. He raises his eyes to Aten, the sun disk, radiant with light, and declares it the sole god, the only divine force. He changes his name, moves the capital to a new city, Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten, and orders that temples be raised to this singular deity. In his reign, art shifts too. Statues show long faces, curved bodies, tender embraces. Scenes of the royal family basking in Aten's rays replace the stern images of gods and kings. For a time, the old order falters. Priests of Ammonius are cast aside, temples closed, traditions shaken. But after his death, the tide returns. His son, Tutankhaten, still a boy, restores the worship of Ammonius and the gods of Egypt, renaming himself Tutankhamun. His reign is brief, his life fragile, ending in youth. Yet his tomb, sealed in the Valley of the Kings, preserves treasures beyond imagination. Golden masks, jeweled amulets, statues, and chariots, all hidden for millennia until uncovered, whispering of Egypt's brilliance to a world long changed. And then comes Ramses II, Ramses the Great, whose reign stretches for 66 years. He builds temples of colossal scale. At Abu Simbel, statues of the king rise taller than mountains, gazing across the desert, eternal guardians of his glory. He wages wars, clashing with the Hittites at Kadesh in a battle fierce and uncertain. Though neither side claims full victory, Ramses signs a treaty of peace, one of the first known in history, a pact sealed in words carved upon tablets. His reign fills Egypt with monuments, with statues, with temples so vast that his name echoes across centuries. Under Ramses, Egypt stands proud, radiant, confident. Its empire stretches wide, its temples gleam in sunlight, its art and literature flourish. Cities bustle with life, Thebes alive with music and markets, Memphis strong with order, Pyramus new and splendid. Ships return laden with incense and ivory, with foreign tribute and gifts. The Nile glitters beneath sails white against blue, its banks alive with laughter, chants, and work. This is Egypt's golden empire, the height of its power, the brilliance of its culture, the radiance of its gods. And yet, even in this brilliance, shadows gather. Successors will not always match the strength of their forebears. Foreign powers grow beyond Egypt's borders, their ambitions pressing close. Nobles within gain strength, priests of Ammonius hold power, and the great pharaohs of old are followed by weaker heirs. The golden light, though still radiant, begins to flicker at its edges. But in this moment, in the age of the New Kingdom, Egypt shines. The shimmer of gold in temple light, the chants echoing in Karnak's vast halls, the sails billowing on desert winds, the incense rising from sacred fires, the laughter of children along the Nile's banks, the music of artisans at their work, the measured steps of pharaohs across stone courtyards. All speak of magnificence, of confidence, of glory. Close your eyes and see it. The great temple of Karnak, its pillars towering like trees of stone. The mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, terraces gleaming in the sun. The statues of Amenhotep gazing serene. The golden mask of Tutankhamun gleaming eternal. The colossal guardians of Abu Simbel staring across the sands. This is the new kingdom, Egypt's golden empire. Its light will cast long shadows, for beyond its brilliance lies the beginning of decline. But for now, it shines with the radiance of eternity. The golden glow of the new kingdom begins to fade. The long reigns of mighty pharaohs, the building of colossal temples, the victories of warriors and the wealth of tribute, all these glories slip like sand between open hands. The Nile still flows, eternal and steady, but the order that once defined Egypt grows fragile. After the reign of Ramses XI, the last pharaoh of the new kingdom, the center weakens. The voice of the pharaoh, once thunder across the two lands, is now uncertain, faint, carried only partway along the river's course. Egypt no longer bows to one power alone. Instead, the crown divides. To the north, in the marshes and fertile fields of the delta, kings establish their seat at Tanis. From there, they rule with titles of pharaoh, wearing the double crown, building palaces and temples. Their courts echo with music and prayer, yet their authority stretches only so far. To the south, in Thebes, the high priests of Ammonius hold sway. They command the wealth of temples, the devotion of priests, the respect of the people. In robes of linen, with incense curling in the air, they walk as kings in all but name. Thus, Egypt is split, not by conquest, but by division within. Two powers share the land, two centers of rule, two voices where once there had been one. Yet the spirit of Egypt endures. Temples still rise, their pylons etched with prayers. Karnak, though weathered by time, still echoes with chants at dawn. Luxor's columns still shine with torchlight in the evenings, shadows flickering on carved walls. Families still carry baskets of bread and jars of beer as offerings. Farmers still plant in the black land, bending to the earth as their fathers and mothers had done for centuries. The Nile, indifferent to politics, still swells and retreats, leaving its dark silt for the people who depend upon it. But in this weakened age, the world presses closer. From the west come new settlers, Libyan chiefs and their clans. At first, they arrive as mercenaries, serving in Egyptian armies, guarding borders, offering their strength. But over time, they settle in the delta, take wives, raise families, and plant roots deep into the land. Their sons inherit not only fields and homes, but ambitions. Historians believe that in time, these Libyan chiefs rose as rulers themselves, founding dynasties that claimed the throne of Egypt. They built temples, offered gifts to Ammonius, and carved their names upon stone. They wore the crowns and held the scepters, seeking to appear as pharaohs of old. And yet, in their rise, Egypt's identity shifted. Foreign blood now sat upon the throne, but the rituals of Egypt continued, its gods still honored, its traditions still alive. Amid this, the paint on temple walls began to fade. The colors of bright reliefs, once fresh and gleaming, softened under the sun, chipped under the desert wind. Statues lost their polish, their edges worn by sand. Monuments cracked, their stones shifting as centuries passed. Yet in half-empty halls, the priests still came. At dawn, they lit incense, their chants rising against silence. They prayed for Ma'at, for balance, for harmony, even as Egypt itself stood divided. To the south, in Nubia, a different story unfolded. For centuries, Nubians had lived in the shadow of Egypt, sometimes conquered, sometimes free, always influenced by the culture of the Nile. They had seen temples, learned the names of Egyptian gods, watched the rituals of pharaohs. They carried these traditions into their own land, weaving them into their identity. To the Nubian kings of Kush, Egypt was not only a neighbor, but a legacy to inherit. From their capital at Napata, the Kushite rulers grew strong. They built temples to Ammonius, raised statues in Egyptian style, honored the same gods with offerings and hymns. And as Egypt weakened, the Nubian kings began to see themselves as the rightful heirs to its greatness. Around the 8th century BCE, they marched north. Their armies crossed the border, advancing along the Nile, taking towns, temples, and cities. The divided rulers of Egypt could not resist. From Tanis to Thebes, power shifted into Kushite hands. And so began the 25th dynasty, the time of the Black Pharaohs. These Nubian kings wore the crowns of Egypt with pride. They stood in the temples of Karnak and Luxor, raising their arms to Ammonius as pharaohs before them had done. They restored shrines, offered gifts, and commissioned works of stone. They sought not to erase Egypt's traditions, but to embody them, to preserve the old order under their renewed strength. In their eyes, they were not foreigners, but the restorers of Maat, the chosen heirs of Egypt's divine legacy. Imagine the sight of Pi, the Nubian king, riding northward, his banners fluttering, his soldiers marching in long lines. He enters Thebes not as conqueror, but as son of the god Ammonius, embraced by priests, crowned in ritual, his rule sanctified. The people bow, for though his skin is dark and his home far to the south, he walks in the path of pharaohs. He raises temples, he guards the Nile, he unites the two lands once more beneath a single crown. For a time, stability returns. Egypt breathes again under strong rulers, even if they are not born of its own soil. The temples of Ammonius swell with offerings, the priests chant in full voice, the fields flourish with grain, the markets hum with trade. The Nile, steady as always, carries boats laden with goods, their sails white in the sun. But beyond the desert horizon, danger grows. To the east, a new power rises, Assyria, fierce and relentless. Their armies march with iron weapons, their chariots thunder across plains, their kings demand tribute from all lands within their reach. Egypt, even under the Black Pharaohs, will not remain untouched. For now, though, the story rests here, in a land divided yet enduring. In halls where paint fades but prayers remain. In temples where incense still curls into the sky. In villages where families plant and harvest as their ancestors always had. In Nubian kings who wear Egyptian crowns, believing themselves protectors of a legacy that stretches back to the dawn of time. Close your eyes and see it. The faded walls of Karnak, still carved with hieroglyphs. The quiet prayers echoing in dim chambers. The desert wind whispering through broken monuments. And always the Nile flowing, silent and eternal, carrying Egypt forward into whatever fate awaits. This is the third intermediate period, a kingdom divided, yet alive, fragile yet enduring. From foreign chiefs and high priests, from Libyans and Nubians, Egypt survives, carrying its soul through centuries of change. But soon, from beyond the sands, Assyria's shadow will fall, and Egypt will face its most dangerous test yet. The age of division had left Egypt weary. The land of pyramids and temples had been pulled between Libyan dynasties, Nubian kings, and the heavy hand of Assyria. The crowns of Egypt had sat upon many brows, some native, some foreign, and the voice of Maat had grown faint in the clamor of rival powers. Yet the Nile still flowed, steady and eternal, and from its waters Egypt would find, for a final time, renewal. Around 664 BCE, a new pharaoh rose from the city of Sais in the western delta. His name was Psamtik, remembered as Psamtik I, founder of the 26th dynasty. With patience, with diplomacy, and with quiet strength, he gathered Egypt once again beneath a single crown. The Assyrians, fierce conquerors, were distracted in distant lands. Psamtik seized the moment, pushing their influence away, drawing the two lands back together. Under his rule, Egypt breathed as though awakening from a long and troubled dream. The temples were filled again with offerings. Priests lit incense at dawn and dusk, their chants rising clear into the air. Statues of pharaohs, carved in gleaming stone, stood once more in courtyards, their gazes firm, their crowns tall. Farmers tilled the black earth, their harvests swelling the granaries. Markets bustled with life, their stalls bright with linen, pottery, and food. This was the Sate Renaissance, a time when Egypt turned both to its glorious past and to the wider world. The art of this age took its inspiration from long ago. Sculptors carved statues in deliberate imitation of Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom masterpieces. Faces serene, bodies idealized, lines precise and strong. It was as though the present sought to anchor itself in the grandeur of memory, tying the fragile now to the eternal then. Reliefs were etched with care, inscriptions written with elegance, temples raised with echoes of earlier designs. Egypt looked backward, not in despair, but in reverence, drawing strength from its ancestors. At the same time, Egypt opened its harbors to the wider Mediterranean. From across the sea, Greek ships sailed into the Nile's mouth, their hulls heavy with oil, wine, and silver. Their voices, foreign and lilting, filled the air of marketplaces, mingling with the calls of Egyptian merchants. In the delta, a trading port named Naucratis grew, a place where Greek settlers built their homes, where shrines rose to their own gods alongside those of Egypt. Imagine the scene. The harbor filled with sails, white against the blue. The creak of wooden hulls. The cries of sailors throwing ropes onto docks. Merchants unloading amphorae, their clay bodies painted with foreign designs. Egyptian scribes standing nearby, recording transactions on papyrus, their reed pens scratching softly. The air smells of fish, of incense, of grain sacks piled high. Voices overlap, Greek, Egyptian, Phoenician, each speaking of trade, each seeking fortune. Psathek's reign brought stability, and his successors carried the torch. The kings of the 26th dynasty, Sate kings as they are called, ruled from Sais, balancing tradition with the demands of a new age. They honored Ammonius at Thebes, raised shrines at Memphis, and offered gifts at Karnak. They recruited Greek mercenaries into their armies, practical soldiers skilled with spear and shield, and they employed Greek traders, who carried Egypt's goods across the Mediterranean world. For a time, Egypt stood proud again, a land of order and abundance, its voice once more respected beyond its borders. Envoys came, bearing gifts, acknowledging Egypt's pharaoh as heir of ancient greatness. Yet beyond the desert horizon, storms gathered. To the east, a vast new empire was rising, the Persians. Fierce and ambitious, their kings demanded tribute from every land their armies reached. Babylon had fallen to them. Lydia too. And in time, their gaze turned to Egypt. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses too marched against the Nile. His armies, disciplined and vast, swept into the delta. The Egyptian pharaoh, Psathek III, stood against him, but the battle turned to disaster. At Pelusium, near the delta's edge, Cambyses triumphed. Egypt fell, and for the first time, the throne of the pharaoh passed to a foreign emperor who ruled from afar. Yet Cambyses and the Persian kings who followed did not abandon Egypt's traditions. They took Egyptian titles, called themselves pharaoh, offered to Ammonius, and stood in temples as kings of the two lands. Reliefs show them in Egyptian form, their crowns high, their scepters raised. They ruled as conquerors, but also as heirs, weaving themselves into Egypt's ancient fabric. Still, the weight of foreign rule was heavy. The Persians demanded tribute, sent governors, and treated Egypt as one province among many. The people murmured, and rebellions flared. Sometimes, for brief years, Egypt won back its independence. Dynasties rose, the 28th, the 29th, the 30th, small sparks of freedom, fragile and short-lived. Local kings raised banners, claimed the double crown, honored the gods in their temples. But always, the Persians returned, their armies stronger, their empire vast. And so Egypt lived in twilight. Its temples still glowed with incense at dawn. Its scribes still traced hieroglyphs onto stone. Its sculptors still carved statues of kings and gods. Farmers still bent to the soil. Children still played along the river. Priests still sang hymns to Ra and Osiris. The Nile still flowed, as it always had. Yet the crown shifted between hands, sometimes Egyptian, sometimes Persian. The voice of the pharaoh no longer steady but fragile, uncertain. Picture Karnak in this age. The paint upon its walls has faded, the stone cracked by centuries of sun. Yet torches still flicker in the courts at night, priests still walk in procession, their linen robes bright against the dark. They carry images of Ammonius upon poles, chanting in rhythm, drums beating softly in the distance. Worship continues, as though time itself has not changed, as though Ma'at still rests firm. In the cities, life is vibrant but mixed. Egyptian merchants bargain in markets where Greek traders and Persian officials also stand. Ships from the Aegean line the docks beside Egyptian boats. Amphorae of wine rest beside baskets of barley. Statues of pharaohs gaze down upon streets where foreign soldiers patrol. The land is Egypt, but the voices that fill it are many. The Sate Renaissance had been Egypt's last great flowering. Its art, deliberate and reverent, had tied the present to the glory of the past. Its kings had balanced tradition with change, inviting foreigners while still guarding Ma'at. But now, under the weight of empire, Egypt could no longer stand wholly free. Still, the Nile did not falter. Its waters rose each year, spreading black silt upon the fields. Children ran laughing through villages, their feet splashing in irrigation canals. Fishermen cast nets, their boats rocking gently. Women ground grain on stone querns, their arms steady, their rhythm timeless. In these humble acts, Egypt endured. The land lived, even as crowns changed, even as foreign kings claimed to be pharaohs. As the centuries turned, Egypt's fate became entwined with powers beyond its deserts. Persia remained strong, though rebellions continued to flare like sparks against its might. Egyptians dreamed of freedom, of a pharaoh born of their own soil, ruling in their own temples. At times they grasped it, only to lose it again. And then, beyond the horizon, another figure rose. A young king from Macedon, whose ambitions stretched farther than the known world. His name was Alexander. His armies moved swiftly, crushing Persia, sweeping across Asia, and in time, turning their gaze toward Egypt. But that is yet to come. For now, Egypt rests in twilight, still alive, still beautiful, still eternal in spirit, though fragile in power. Its temples still stand, its prayers still rise, its river still flows. The Sate kings had given the land one last glow of glory, linking it to the greatness of the past. The Persians rule, yet the heart of Egypt beats on. Close your eyes and see it. Statues gleaming under the sun. Greek ships sailing into harbors. Incense curling upward in ancient temples. Farmers bending to black earth, planting seeds. The Nile glistening in moonlight, steady, eternal, carrying prayers upon its surface. This is the late period, Egypt's last glory, fragile yet radiant, awaiting the next chapter. Soon, Alexander will come, and with him, a new world will dawn upon the Nile. The sands of Egypt shimmer beneath the bright sun, and into this ancient land comes a new figure. In 332 BCE, Alexander of Macedon, already conqueror of Persia, marches with his armies through the desert and toward the Nile. Where others had come as invaders, he is greeted as a liberator. The Persians are gone, their rule broken, and the Egyptians, weary of foreign empires, open their arms to this young king. In Memphis, he is crowned as pharaoh, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The priests declare him chosen, son of Ammonius, protector of Maat. Seeking divine confirmation, Alexander journeys west to the Siwa oasis, where the temple of Ammonius stands in solitude among the sands. There, it is said, the oracle greets him not as mortal, but as son of the god himself. From that day, his claim to divinity is sealed, both in the eyes of Greeks and Egyptians alike. Alexander does not linger. His conquests drive him farther east, toward Persia, toward India, toward horizons unseen. But before he leaves, he imagines something new upon Egyptian soil, a city that will bear his name. At the edge of the sea, where the Nile's waters touch the Mediterranean, he marks the ground for Alexandria. Wide streets, broad harbors, a city of marble and stone where Greek ambition and Egyptian tradition will meet. A place of trade, of knowledge, of light. Though Alexander himself will never see it completed, his vision plants the seed of a city that will echo across centuries. When Alexander dies in Babylon, his empire is divided. His generals seize portions of his vast conquests, carving kingdoms from his dream of unity. Egypt falls to Ptolemy, one of his closest companions. Ptolemy takes the land as his own, not as satrap or governor, but as king. He dons the crowns of Egypt, calls himself pharaoh, and begins a dynasty that will rule for nearly 300 years, the Ptolemaic dynasty. In Alexandria, his capital, the city grows into a marvel. Wide boulevards stretch beneath marble colonnades. Palaces gleam with polished stone, their courtyards filled with fountains and gardens. The harbor bustles with ships, their sails catching the sea wind, their decks heavy with goods from every corner of the Mediterranean. Merchants shout in Greek, in Egyptian, in Phoenician, their voices rising in a chorus of trade. Fishermen haul nets shimmering with silver catch, while craftsmen carve statues for temples both Greek and Egyptian. Upon the island of Pharaohs rises a wonder of the world, the great lighthouse. Its flame burns bright at night, guiding ships across the dark waters, its tower gleaming white by day, a beacon visible for miles. Sailors speak of it with awe, for never before had such a guardian been built upon the sea. And at the heart of the city, the great library grows. It is said to hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls, collected from across the world. Poetry of Greece, wisdom of Egypt, knowledge of Babylon, maps of far lands, treatises on medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. Scholars walk its halls, voices echoing beneath high ceilings, debating, studying, translating. In Alexandria, knowledge itself becomes a treasure as precious as gold. The blending of cultures defines this new age. The Ptolemies rule as Greek kings, yet they wear the crowns of Pharaoh. They are depicted in temples making offerings to Ammonius and Isis, their names written in hieroglyphs beside those of the gods. They commission temples in Egyptian style, their walls carved with familiar rituals, their sanctuaries filled with incense. Yet in their palaces they speak Greek, adorn themselves with Greek art, and sponsor Greek poets and philosophers. In villages along the Nile, life continues much as it always had. Farmers still bend to the soil, planting in the black earth left by the flood. Priests still tend to temples, offering prayers at dawn and dusk. But in the great city of Alexandria, the world feels changed. Greek theaters stage plays. Philosophers debate in courtyards. Merchants from far lands barter in crowded markets. The voices of Egypt mingle with the voices of Greece, creating something both old and new. Among the rulers of this dynasty, some shine more brightly than others. Ptolemy II, called Philadelphus, nurtures the arts and sciences. Under his patronage, Alexandria becomes the beacon of learning, the library swelling with scrolls, the museum flourishing as a center of study. Statues are raised, temples expanded, ships built, trade flowing strong. Egypt glows with prosperity, a crossroads of cultures. But the Ptolemies are not always at peace, even among themselves. Their family is marked by intrigue, rivalry, and blood. Brothers and sisters clash for the throne. Husbands and wives become enemies, plots woven in the shadows of palaces. Assassinations, betrayals, and sudden turns of fortune shape their history as much as their monuments. The dynasty endures, but not without turbulence. In time, queens rise to prominence. Cleopatra II and Cleopatra III wield real power, standing not as consorts, but as rulers in their own right. They maneuver through webs of intrigue, command armies, and hold the loyalty of priests and people. Their names, carved in stone, stand beside those of kings, their crowns no less radiant. Walk the streets of Alexandria in this age. The air is filled with the scent of incense burning in Greek temples, with the smell of bread rising from Egyptian ovens. The marble of colonnades glows in sunlight, the stone of Egyptian shrines cool in shadow. In one hall, philosophers debate the nature of the cosmos. In another, scribes copy hymns to Osiris. In the harbor, ships unload amphorae of oil and wine, while others depart with papyrus and grain. Children play in courtyards, their laughter mingling with the cries of traders, the chants of priests, the songs of sailors. The Nile continues its eternal rhythm. Its floods still feed the fields, its waters still carry boats between Thebes, Memphis, and Alexandria. Though the rulers are Greek in tongue and custom, the land itself remains Egypt, its gods still honored, its traditions still alive in every village along the river. The Ptolemies seek to bind themselves to this eternal legacy. They build temples in the old style, such as the great sanctuary at Edfu dedicated to Horus, its pylons towering, its walls covered in inscriptions. They honor Isis at Philae, raising columns and sanctuaries that echo with hymns. Even as Greek marble shines in Alexandria, the ancient gods remain strong, their voices carried by priests who chant as they had for millennia. And yet, beneath the splendor, tension lingers. The Ptolemies, Greek in heart, never fully merge with the Egyptian people. Their palaces are filled with intrigue, their alliances fragile, their rules sometimes questioned. Foreign mercenaries guard their courts, and rivals press at their borders. Still, their dynasty endures, weaving Greek ambition with Egyptian tradition into a tapestry unlike any other. As centuries pass, Egypt under the Ptolemies stands as both ancient and new. It is a land of temples and scrolls, of priests and philosophers, of Greek kings wearing Egyptian crowns. Its capital shines as one of the wonders of the ancient world, its harbor filled with ships, its lighthouse guiding travelers, its library guarding knowledge. Yet in the distance, another power grows stronger. Rome, across the sea, expands its reach, its legions marching ever farther. In time, Egypt will feel its shadow. But before that, one queen will rise, her name echoing louder than all others, her story remembered for centuries beyond her reign. Her name is Cleopatra VII. Close your eyes and picture it, the marble colonnades of Alexandria glowing in sunlight, the lighthouse of Pharaohs burning against the night, the voices of scholars echoing in halls of scrolls, the smoke of incense rising in old temples where priests chant to Ammonius and Isis, the Nile flowing eternal, carrying both memory and change. This is the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greeks on the Nile. A kingdom of splendor and intrigue, of temples and marble, of scrolls and sails, of gods and philosophy. And soon, in its final chapter, one queen will stand at the crossroads of worlds, her fate bound to the fall of Egypt itself. The palace walls of Alexandria shimmer in the Mediterranean light, marble gleaming white against the blue of sea and sky. Within their halls, in the year 69 BCE, a child is born. Her name is Cleopatra, daughter of Ptolemy, descendant of Macedonian conquerors and Egyptian pharaohs, heir to a kingdom that is both ancient and fragile. She will grow to be remembered not merely as a queen, but as the last sovereign of Egypt, the final voice of a civilization that had stood for 3,000 years. Cleopatra's youth is marked by study and by watchful eyes. Unlike many of her forebears, she does not live only in Greek. She learns Egyptian, the tongue of the people, the language of the Nile. Historians believe she mastered many others too: Latin, Aramaic, perhaps as many as 9 languages. Her mind as quick as her voice was melodic. She reads philosophy, poetry, and the sacred rituals of the priests. She learns mathematics and astronomy, and the lore of the stars. In her, intellect burns as brightly as beauty, and her gift is not only charm but understanding. The city in which she grows is a marvel of the ancient world. Alexandria, the jewel of the Mediterranean, built on the dream of Alexander. Its wide streets are lined with marble colonnades. Its harbors gleam with golden ships, their sails swelling with sea winds. Merchants crowd the docks, their stalls bursting with grain, papyrus, glass, spices, perfumes. Greek philosophers debate in shaded courtyards. Priests chant in the great temple of Serapis, incense curling through high halls. And in the distance, upon the island of Pharaohs, the great lighthouse burns its eternal flame, guiding travelers into the embrace of Egypt's greatest port. Cleopatra grows among this richness, yet she is no stranger to uncertainty. The dynasty into which she is born is torn by rivalries, siblings set against siblings, rulers against rivals, power fractured by jealousy. When her father dies, Cleopatra ascends the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. She is still young, barely more than a girl, but her intelligence sets her apart. Yet palace intrigues stir quickly. Advisors to her brother conspire against her, and she is forced into exile, driven from Alexandria while her sibling claims the throne for himself. But Cleopatra is not so easily silenced. It is said that she devised a daring return. Julius Caesar, the Roman general, had come to Alexandria, and Cleopatra sought his favor. To reach him, legend tells, she had herself smuggled into the palace, wrapped in a roll of cloth or perhaps a carpet, carried through guarded halls and unrolled before the Romans' eyes. However the tale unfolded, it is certain that she charmed him. With wit, with beauty, with presence, she won Caesar's support. With Roman power at her side, Cleopatra regained her throne. Her brother drowned in the Nile during the struggles that followed, and she emerged as queen, sovereign in her own right. From then on, she ruled not as puppet but as pharaoh, crowned in the temples, honored by priests, hailed by her people. She bore herself as both Greek monarch and Egyptian queen, her image carved in temples alongside Isis, the great mother goddess, her titles inscribed in hieroglyphs as well as Greek. Her bond with Caesar grew deep. Together they had a son, Caesarion, whom she declared the heir not only of Egypt but perhaps of Rome itself. She journeyed with him to Rome, where her presence dazzled the city. Cloaked in gold, attended by retinues, she carried with her the majesty of the Nile. Romans marveled at her beauty, her brilliance, her wealth, her command of a kingdom older than their own. Yet her presence also stirred unease, whispers of ambition, fears of a queen who might bind Rome to Egypt with bonds of blood. When Caesar was struck down in 44 BCE, assassinated in the Senate, Cleopatra fled. She returned to Egypt, carrying her young son, mourning her lost ally, and facing once more the uncertainty of the world. But history was not done with her. Into her life came Mark Antony, one of Caesar's generals, a man of fire and passion. Their meeting is remembered as legend. Cleopatra sailed to him in splendor, her barge gilded and adorned, its sails dyed purple, the color of royalty. Perfume drifted across the river, music of flutes and lyres filled the air, and she herself lay beneath a canopy, arrayed like Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Antony was captivated. Their bond grew into alliance, into love, into the weaving of 2 destinies. Together, they dreamed of empire. Cleopatra bore him children, twins named Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and later another son. Their feasts became the stuff of rumor and wonder, banquets where golden cups brimmed with wine, halls thick with incense, dancers and musicians filling the night with rhythm. Upon the Nile, their barges drifted like floating palaces, torches blazing against the dusk, laughter echoing beneath the stars. For Egypt, Antony was both ally and protector. With him, Cleopatra sought to restore her kingdom's strength, to ensure that her son Caesarion might inherit not just Egypt, but a place in the wider world. But across the sea, Rome watched with suspicion. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, turned his power against them. In his speeches, Cleopatra was painted as a temptress, a foreign queen ensnaring Roman generals, a danger to Rome itself. His words were weapons, his propaganda a blade sharper than any sword. The tension came to battle. In 31 BCE, off the coast of Actium, their fleets clashed. Cleopatra's ships, their sails purple in the wind, fought beside Antony's against Octavian's disciplined navy. But the tide turned. Confusion spread. Cleopatra's flagship fled, and Antony followed, their fleet scattered, their cause undone. The dream of empire dissolved upon the waves. They retreated to Alexandria, their last refuge. There, among the marble palaces and golden harbors of her youth, Cleopatra faced the end. Octavian marched upon Egypt, his legions unstoppable, his power absolute. Antony, defeated and broken, took his own life, falling upon his sword. Cleopatra, left alone, sought to meet her fate not in chains but in dignity. It is said that she prepared herself with care. Draped in royal robes, adorned with jewels, she entered a chamber with her handmaidens. In her hand, or perhaps within a basket of figs, was brought an asp, a serpent sacred to the gods. With its bite, she chose her own death, passing into eternity as queen, as goddess, as the last pharaoh of Egypt. The year was 30 BCE. With her death, Egypt fell to Rome. Caesarion was killed, her children taken into custody, her throne dissolved into a province of the Roman Empire. The age of pharaohs, stretching back to Narmer and the unification of the two lands, had come to its end. Yet Cleopatra's story did not vanish. Her name echoed through history, remembered not only as queen but as legend. To some, she was enchantress, to others strategist, to others still the embodiment of Egypt itself, proud, radiant, and doomed. Her face was carved upon coins, her deeds told and retold, her presence haunting poets, playwrights, and chroniclers for centuries. She became symbol as much as woman, the last light of a civilization whose glow still lingers. Close your eyes and imagine her. Perfume drifting through marble halls, purple sails catching the wind, torchlight dancing upon the polished stone of Alexandria's palaces, the hush of desert twilight beyond the city walls. And in the heart of it all, Cleopatra, queen, lover, mother, pharaoh. This is her story. The last queen of Egypt, the last pharaoh. With her passing, the Nile no longer bore kings to eternity, but bent instead to the power of Rome. And yet, in memory, she lives on, eternal as the river itself, voice of a world that has passed, but will never be forgotten. The queen is gone. Cleopatra lies in her tomb, her life ended by her own hand, her kingdom claimed by Rome. In the year 30 BCE, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, the first emperor, takes Egypt not as any other province, but as his personal possession. The double crown of the pharaoh is no longer worn by a native king, but absorbed into the distant figure of Rome's ruler. Egypt, once sovereign, is now the jewel in another's crown, and yet the Nile still flows. Under the Caesars, Egypt becomes one of the richest provinces of the Roman world, its fertile lands more precious than gold. From the delta and the valley, ships are loaded with grain, their holds stacked full, their decks crowded with sailors. They glide northward, sails full with the wind, carrying food to Rome itself. It is said that without Egypt's bounty, the hungry masses of the empire's capital could not be fed. The Nile, steady and generous, becomes the lifeline not only of Egypt but of Rome. At Alexandria, the heart of this new order, life pulses with energy. The city, founded by Alexander, now stands as Rome's second jewel, surpassed only by the eternal city itself. Its harbors bustle with movement, ships from Greece, Italy, Syria, and beyond. The creak of ropes and the slap of waves against would fill the air. Dockworkers shout as amphorae of oil and wine are unloaded, as sacks of grain are heaved aboard, as exotic animals and ivory are led down gangplanks. The great lighthouse of Pharaohs still stands, its flame glowing against the night, its reflection dancing upon dark waters. To sailors, it remains a beacon of safety, a marvel of human hands guiding them through the treacherous channels of the coast. At dawn, its pale stone gleams with the light of the rising sun, towering above the sea as though reaching toward heaven. Within the city's streets, colonnades of marble stretch wide, shadows long against polished floors. Markets overflow with goods, Egyptian papyrus, Roman glass, silks from the east, spices whose scents linger in the warm air. Voices mix, Greek, Latin, Coptic, Hebrew, each carried with urgency, each telling of trade, of faith, of ambition. Scholars still gather in the libraries, though the great library itself has suffered, diminished from its imagined glory. Still, scrolls are copied, knowledge is preserved, and voices echo softly in the quiet halls where men of learning seek wisdom. The rustle of papyrus, the murmur of debate, the scrape of reed pens on parchment continue, as though time itself has slowed within those walls. In temples, ancient gods remain alive, though their voices grow softer under Roman rule. Priests in white linen still approach the altars, still carry incense, still chant the hymns of millennia. They raise their arms to Isis and Osiris, to Ammonius and Horus, asking for balance and abundance. Torches flicker against walls covered with hieroglyphs, their colors faded yet still proud. Offerings of bread, flowers, and wine are placed at the feet of statues, their faces serene, their eyes gazing eternally forward. The rituals are unchanged, the prayers unbroken, but outside the temple walls, the empire shifts, and new gods are carried in. For the Romans bring their pantheon too. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Diana join Isis and Horus in the city's shrines. Some temples are shared, statues placed side by side, prayers mingling in the smoky air. Egyptian deities are adopted in Rome itself, Isis above all, her cult spreading across the Mediterranean, her image appearing in distant cities where the Nile's waters never reach. Egypt's gods, once sovereign, now travel under Roman banners, their influence spreading even as their homeland submits. Daily life continues much as it always had. In villages along the Nile, farmers rise at dawn, walk barefoot into damp fields, and guide oxen through furrows. Their children laugh and play by irrigation canals. Their wives grind grain and bake bread. Their homes glow with lamplight at dusk. Life along the river remains constant, untouched by the great shifts of dynasties and empires. In Alexandria, however, life feels different. Roman officials sit in marble halls, judging disputes, collecting taxes, directing grain shipments. Egyptian scribes still serve, their hands skilled with writing, their voices fluent in both Greek and the native tongue. Soldiers march in Roman armor along the boulevards, their shields gleaming, their Latin commands sharp and foreign. In this mingling of worlds, new faiths begin to take root. Judaism thrives in Alexandria, its communities vibrant and strong. And soon, from its earliest whispers, Christianity finds soil here too. Quiet at first, almost secretive, its followers gather in small groups, sharing prayers and bread, speaking of one God, one Savior, one eternal promise. They are persecuted at times, their meetings broken, their faith tested by Roman officials. Yet they endure, and over generations they grow. Alexandria becomes one of Christianity's greatest centers, its bishops respected, its theologians shaping doctrine. The old gods, though still honored in temples, begin to feel the shadow of this rising faith. Statues still receive offerings, but fewer. Hymns are still sung, but not as strong. The Nile flows, but the spiritual currents of Egypt begin to change. There are moments of unrest, sparks of rebellion. Egyptians rise against Roman governors, their anger fed by taxes, by hunger, by pride. The uprisings are met with the iron of Rome, swiftly suppressed, their fires extinguished. Yet in the quiet afterward, the people return to their fields, their workshops, their temples, carrying on as they always had. The centuries pass. Rome changes, but Egypt remains its breadbasket, its wealth sustaining the empire. Grain ships sail endlessly, their white sails like wings upon the sea. Marble columns still stand tall in Alexandria, their shadows shifting with the sun. Temples still rise in Upper Egypt, their pylons carved with prayers. And Christianity grows stronger, gathering hearts, filling homes, spreading from house to house, until its presence can no longer be denied. At last, in the year 391 CE, the Emperor Theodosius I issues a decree. Pagan worship, long tolerated, is now forbidden. The old temples are closed, their gates barred, their altars silenced. Priests lay aside their linen robes. Statues of Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Ammonius stand abandoned, their incense bowls cold, their offerings gone. The last prayers of a 3,000-year tradition fade into silence. In Philae, the temple of Isis resists a little longer, but even there, the torches will one day be extinguished. Imagine the stillness. A temple at dawn, its great hall empty. The carved walls, once vibrant with ritual, echo only with the sound of desert wind. The statue of the goddess gazes forward, but no hands approach with offerings, no voices chant her hymns. The silence is heavy, reverent, sorrowful. The gods of Egypt, who had lived in the hearts of millions, retreat now into memory, their power carried not in worship but in stone, in story, in the eternal river that once bore their names in prayer. And yet, the Nile flows on. Its waters, eternal and calm, still rise and fall, still nourish the black earth, still carry boats along its current. Farmers still plant, still harvest, still live by its rhythm. Children still splash in its shallows, fishermen still cast their nets. Though the gods fall silent, though the temples close, though Egypt bends beneath Rome, the river remains unchanged, whispering of eternity. Close your eyes and picture Alexandria under the Caesars. The creak of ships in the harbor, the flame of the lighthouse burning against the night, the murmur of scholars unrolling scrolls, their voices echoing in dim halls, the hush of prayers fading in half-empty temples, the footsteps of Roman soldiers upon marble streets, and beneath it all the Nile flowing steady, eternal, bearing Egypt forward through change, through silence, through time. This is Roman Egypt, a province of empire, a jewel of the Caesars, a land where old gods faded and new faiths rose, where the river endured even as history turned its tide. The voices of the old temples have fallen quiet. The hymns to Ammonius, to Isis, to Osiris no longer rise with the dawn. The pharaohs are gone, their crowns dissolved into dust and memory. Yet Egypt does not vanish. Its stones remain, and in the silence of centuries they whisper still. Along the banks of the Nile, the temples of Karnak and Luxor stand in hushed majesty. Their columns soar like petrified forests, their capitals carved in lotus and papyrus shapes. The walls glow faintly with carvings, scenes of gods bestowing crowns upon kings, of priests raising offerings, of pharaohs smiting enemies beneath the gaze of falcons and suns. The colors, though faded, cling stubbornly to stone. Reds, blues, and golds linger, fragile sparks of lives long past. No priest chants here now, no incense curls upward, yet in the stillness, one can almost hear it. The echo of ritual, the murmur of sacred words carried on the wind. At Philae, the last sanctuary of Isis, the torches burned longer than anywhere else. Even as Rome forbade the old ways, here prayers continued, carried in soft voices and secret rites. The goddess lingered in her island temple, her sanctuary afloat upon the river. Travelers who came by boat would see its pylons rising from the water, walls etched with stars and serpents, goddesses and kings. It was for a time a final refuge of the divine. Then too its doors closed. Yet its stones remain, kissed by water, shaded by palm, holding memory like a vessel. Beyond, in the desert, the pyramids rise eternal. At Giza, Khufu's vast monument still towers against the horizon, its stones weathered by sun and sand yet unbroken. The great Sphinx crouches at its side, its lion's body and human face gazing east, toward the rising sun. For thousands of years it has watched, its features softened by wind, its form half buried, then freed again. Time brushes past, but the Sphinx endures, silent guardian of a forgotten world. Through centuries, travelers came to stand before these monuments. Greeks who marveled at their size, Romans who recorded their wonder, Arabs who wove stories of magic and kings, Europeans who dreamed of mysteries hidden beneath the sand. Each who stood there felt the same awe, the same hush before stone too vast to ignore. The pyramids spoke, not in words, but in presence. They declared that once there was greatness here, once a people dreamed of eternity and built it into earth and sky. For long ages, though, the voices of the pharaohs were locked away. The temples were covered with dust, the inscriptions unreadable, their language lost to time. Hieroglyphs, once alive with prayers and decrees, fell silent. For 1,000 years and more, their meaning lay hidden, like a song forgotten, waiting for ears that could understand. Then, in the year 1799, a stone was uncovered near the town of Rosetta. Upon it were carved the same words in 3 scripts, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. Soldiers and scholars carried it to Europe, and from its surface, the first key to the old tongue was glimpsed. The stone became the bridge across silence. Years later, the French scholar Jean-François Champollion gave breath back to the language. With patience, with brilliance, he unlocked the code, the voices of Egypt stirring once more. The words of pharaohs emerged from stone. Prayers of priests, records of scribes, hymns to the gods, all awoke from their long sleep. After centuries of silence, the walls of temples spoke again. Their whispers were understood, their stories told. From then, the legacy of Egypt lived not only in its monuments, but in its words. Histories were translated, myths retold, memories shared. The dreams of the ancients, carved in stone, became known to the living once more. And so, Egypt's presence did not fade. It endured, not only in ruins, but in the imagination of the world. Its art inspired the hands of sculptors and builders in distant lands. Its pyramids gave shape to ideas of eternity, of reaching beyond life. Its gods found echoes in distant faiths, their symbols lingering in ways subtle and profound. The thought of Egypt, the vastness of its time, the weight of its dreams, entered the heart of humanity. The Nile flows still, as it always has. Its waters shimmer in moonlight, its banks fragrant with lotus and palm. The river carries memories as much as boats. The laughter of children, the chants of priests, the songs of workers hauling stone. It whispers of harvests, of floods, of prayers given and prayers answered. Standing by its edge today, one feels its constancy. The same breeze touches the skin as touched those who lived 5,000 years ago. The same stars shine above, reflected in dark waters, the same patterns traced by eyes ancient and modern alike. Close your eyes and you are there. The desert night is cool, the sand soft beneath your feet. The scent of lotus drifts upon the air, faint yet sweet. The ruins rise around you, their stones warm from the day, cooling slowly beneath the moon. The walls are silent, but your heart knows they have spoken. The stars above are countless, their light steady, their patterns unchanged. And the Nile flows, dark and gleaming, a ribbon of silver winding through eternity. Egypt's pharaohs are gone. Their crowns lie buried, their voices preserved in echoes. But their story never ends. It endures in the pyramids, in the temples, in the hieroglyphs carved deep into stone. It endures in the Rosetta Stone, in the scholars who listened, in the travelers who stood in awe. It endures in art and memory, in every dream of eternity, in every stone raised against the sky. Still, forever, Egypt whispers. Its voice is not gone. It flows with the river, shines with the stars, rests in the sands. And in your heart, as you listen, you carry it forward. This is the final whisper of ancient Egypt. Not an ending, but a flowing on like the Nile itself, eternal, endless, always moving, always alive. The river glides in silence beneath the sky, its waters gleaming with light, its surface stirred by soft winds. This is the Nile, the giver of life, the endless thread upon which Egypt was strung. Long before monuments rose in the desert, before crowns and dynasties, it was the river that shaped the rhythm of days, of seasons, of generations. The heartbeat of Egypt was not only in temples and palaces, but in villages and fields, in laughter and labor, in harvests and prayers. Each year, the river swelled with the summer floods. Dark waters poured down from distant rains in the highlands far to the south. The Nile rose over its banks, spreading across fields, carrying with it the gift of silt, rich and black, thick with the essence of life. As the waters receded, they left behind a skin of fertile soil, a canvas ready for seed. Without this rhythm, there could be no Egypt. With it, the land bloomed, turning desert into garden. The cycle of life began anew with the flood. Farmers led oxen across damp fields, their hooves pressing the earth flat, ready for the plow. Wooden plows, simple yet strong, broke the soil, guided by steady hands. Into the furrows fell seeds of barley and wheat, scattered by practiced gestures, each seed a promise. The sun warmed the earth, and from it sprouted green shoots, tender and fragile at first, then growing tall and golden as weeks passed. At harvest, the fields shimmered in the light. Sickle blades of copper glinted as farmers cut the stalks, binding them into bundles, stacking them high. Children carried sheaves in small arms, their laughter rising above the rustle of grain. Donkeys brayed as they hauled loads to the village. In courtyards, families threshed and winnowed, the air alive with chaff, the rhythm of work steady as the river itself. Granaries filled, their cool mud brick walls holding the season's labor, storing bread for the year to come. Life in the villages unfolded with this rhythm. Houses of mud brick clustered close, their walls cool against the sun, their roofs flat and shaded. By morning, smoke rose from hearths as bread baked upon hot stones. The smell drifted through narrow lanes, warm, yeasty, comforting. Children played by the riverbank, chasing each other through reeds, their feet splashing in shallow pools. Fishermen cast nets woven of flax, pulling them in heavy with silver fish that gleamed in the light. Women ground grain upon stone querns, their hands steady, their motions repeated as they had been for countless generations. Herders guided cattle and goats across pastures, their calls echoing across the plain. The animals' hooves stirred dust, their bells chimed softly, their shadows stretched long at dusk. Palm trees swayed, their fronds rustling with the breeze, their dates hanging heavy, sweet and sticky in the sun. Gardens near the river brimmed with onions, garlic, melons, and beans, tended carefully, watered with channels drawn from the Nile. Artisans shaped the world with their hands. In shaded workshops, potters spun wheels, clay wet and pliant between their fingers. They lifted vessels smooth and curved, jars for water, bowls for grain, lamps for light. When the sun burned high, the clay dried firm, the smell of earth and heat mingling. Weavers bent over looms, threads of flax stretched taut, linen emerging fine and pale, light as breeze upon the skin. Carpenters shaped wood from imported cedar or local acacia, carving boats that rocked gently upon the river, chests for storage, chairs for sitting, beds for sleeping. Jewelers worked in small chambers, their eyes sharp, their hands steady as they inlaid gold with lapis lazuli, turquoise, and carnelian, each bead a drop of color, each necklace a shimmer of wealth and devotion. In every village, scribes held quiet authority. With reed pens and black and red ink, they recorded the harvest, the taxes, the prayers. Upon rolls of papyrus, they wrote accounts of grain given, labor promised, offerings made. They preserved stories and songs, myths of gods and kings, wisdom passed down for children not yet born. To write was to shape memory into permanence, to give voice to silence, to carry the present into eternity. The murmur of their pens, the rustle of scrolls, were sounds as sacred as any hymn. Religion was woven into the fabric of each day. At household shrines, families placed small offerings, bread, beer, flowers, or incense. Clay figures of protective gods, Bess with his dwarf's face, Tarit with her hippopotamus body, stood watch in corners of homes, guarding children, blessing mothers, keeping ill fortune away. At dawn, a whispered prayer might rise with the smoke of a lamp. At night, a song might drift into the quiet, calling upon Isis for comfort, upon Osiris for guidance. Festivals brought the community together, moments of joy woven into the seasons. When the flood came, when the harvest was stored, when the temples marked sacred days, villages filled with music. Flutes trilled, drums echoed, sistrums rattled, and voices lifted in song. Dancers moved in circles, their feet kicking dust into golden air. Tables groaned with food, roasted fowl, bread dipped in honey, jars of beer sweet and cool. Laughter mingled with song, and for a night, work was forgotten, and life was celebration. The Nile itself was at the center of these rhythms, not just as water and soil, but as divine presence. The river was happy, the bringer of bounty, the sustainer of all. When the floods rose high, joy filled the land. When they failed, anxiety shadowed every hearth. Each person knew in their bones that the river's gift was life itself. Songs were sung to it, prayers offered, praises carved upon stone. The cycle repeated, season after season. Flood, planting, harvest. Birth, marriage, death. The river rose, the river fell, yet always it returned. Children became adults, adults became ancestors, but the Nile endured. It bound all lives together, from farmer to artisan, from scribe to priest. Its gift was constancy, the rhythm of eternity felt in the pulse of each day. Close your eyes, and you are there. You hear the rustle of reeds swaying in the wind, the splash of a net cast into the water. You smell bread fresh from the oven, sweet with honey, warm against your hands. You see children racing barefoot through the dust, their laughter bright against the air. You feel the warmth of sun upon fertile soil, the coolness of river water against your skin. This is Egypt beyond kings and monuments. This is Egypt of the people, of the river, of life's steady flow. Pharaohs may rise and fall, dynasties may come and go, but the Nile and those who live beside it endure. The heartbeat of Egypt is here, eternal in the daily rhythm, in the laughter of children, in the grain stored in cool granaries, in the prayers whispered by firelight. This is the gift of the Nile, timeless, endless, forever carrying the lives of those who called its banks home. The sun rises over the Nile, its light spilling gold across the waters. In the stillness of dawn, the river shimmers, and in that glow, the Egyptians saw not merely sunlight, but the presence of a god. To them, each day was a cycle of the divine, each moment part of a sacred pattern. Their world was alive with gods and spirits, with voices that guided, protected, and judged. The two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, were bound together not only by the river, but by belief. Among the greatest of their gods was Ra, the sun itself, rising from the eastern horizon as a falcon crowned with a blazing disk. His journey across the sky was the pulse of life, his descent into the west the passage into night. It was believed that at sunset, Ra traveled through the underworld, facing chaos and serpents, only to rise again at dawn reborn, bringing light to all creation. To worship Ra was to honor the rhythm of existence itself, the endless renewal of day and night. Osiris, lord of the afterlife, offered a different promise. Once a king upon the earth, Osiris was said to have been slain by his brother, only to be restored by the love and magic of his wife, Isis. He became ruler of the Duat, the land beyond death, where he judged souls with fairness. To the Egyptians, Osiris embodied hope, that life did not end at the tomb, but continued, renewed, eternal as the Nile's flood. Isis, his queen, was the goddess of motherhood and magic, her wings outstretched to protect, her voice whispered in prayers for healing and love. She was the comfort of mothers, the guardian of children, the patroness of kings. It was said that no prayer to Isis went unheard, her compassion flowing as wide as the river itself. Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, rose as the falcon god of kingship. Each pharaoh was seen as his earthly embodiment, carrying his protection, his strength, his right to rule. His eyes were the sun and the moon, his flight the arc of destiny across the sky. Anubis, black jackal god, watched over the dead. With quiet vigilance, he guided souls to the tomb, preserved the body with sacred rites, and stood beside the scales in judgment. His hands touched the linen of mummies, his voice whispered spells to ward away harm. To the living, he was a guardian, solemn and faithful, ensuring that no soul wandered lost. And Hathor, goddess of joy, of music, of beauty and love, brought sweetness to existence. Her face was that of a cow or a radiant woman, her presence felt in festivals, in laughter, in song. She was called the Lady of Turquoise, the patroness of dancers and musicians, the bringer of delight. Where Hathor was, life shone with warmth and peace. Together, these gods filled the landscape of Egypt. They were present in the river, in the desert, in the sky, in the wind. Every temple, every shrine, every humble offering in a mud-brick home was a thread in the fabric of the divine. Temples rose as living centers of devotion. At dawn, priests entered their courts, their linen robes gleaming white in the morning light. They lit lamps, swept sanctuaries clean, washed the statues of the gods, and dressed them in fine linens, adorning them with jewelry. Incense burned, its fragrance curling into the air, carrying prayers heavenward. Hymns were chanted, words repeated that had been spoken for centuries, voices echoing through stone halls. The gods were tended not as distant powers, but as honored presences, living beings dwelling in sacred rooms. Festivals filled the cities with life. In great processions, the statues of the gods were carried out from their sanctuaries, borne on gilded boats upon the shoulders of priests. Drums beat, flutes trilled, dancers swayed, singers raised hymns. The air was alive with music and perfume, with the laughter of children and the reverence of elders. Boats floated upon the Nile, carrying images of gods to neighboring temples, their sails bright in the sun. These moments were both celebration and communion, times when the people met the divine face to face, when heaven walked among them in form of wood and gold. Yet beneath the joy lay the solemn truth that all lives, no matter how radiant, ended in death. For the Egyptians, this was not an end but a passage. The soul began its journey in the underworld, guided by prayers and spells. It faced gates and guardians, trials and questions. To pass safely, it carried charms, amulets, and the sacred words of the Book of the Dead, written on papyrus scrolls or painted upon the walls of tombs. These words were maps of the unseen, instructions for the soul, weapons against chaos, keys to eternity. At last came judgment. In the hall of Ma'at, the soul's heart was placed upon scales, weighed against the feather of truth. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it was devoured by Ammit, the devourer, and the soul ceased to exist. But if the heart was light, balanced with the feather, the soul was declared pure. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, recorded the judgment. Osiris welcomed the righteous into the field of reeds, a paradise where crops grew tall, where waters flowed clear, where loved ones reunited. It was life perfected, eternal Egypt, an afterlife as abundant and familiar as the land itself. To reach that paradise, the body had to be preserved. Mummification was sacred art, a gift to the dead. The body was washed, anointed, and wrapped in layers of linen. Amulets were placed between wrappings, each carrying protection. The eye of Horus, the scarab beetle, the knot of Isis. The face might be covered with a mask of gold, painted with serene features, eyes wide and eternal. Coffins were adorned with spells, with images of gods guarding the deceased. The tomb became a house for eternity, its walls painted with offerings, with fields of paradise, with the journeys of the sun. For the Egyptians, this vision was not only for kings, but for all who lived. The pharaoh might build pyramids, the nobles might raise grand tombs, but even the simplest farmer placed amulets upon his loved ones, whispered prayers for their journey, offered food at small shrines to ease their path. Religion bound rich and poor alike, all hearts turned toward the promise of eternity. The pharaoh himself was more than ruler. He was Horus in life, Osiris in death, the divine bridge between earth and heaven. His role was to uphold Ma'at, order, harmony, justice, against the forces of chaos. Yet in every home, in every village, people shared this duty. By offering kindness, by honoring gods and ancestors, by living with balance, they too upheld Ma'at. The divine was not distant, but woven into the pulse of each day. Close your eyes and feel it. The fragrance of incense curling upward in a quiet temple. Golden sunlight falling across stone walls covered with prayers. The low hum of chants echoing through cool halls. The touch of linen, smooth and light. The still air of a tomb, painted with stars and fields, promising eternity. This was the world of the Egyptians, a land where gods walked among mortals, where death was a doorway, where the soul's journey was guided by faith and ritual. It was a vision of comfort, a belief that life flowed like the river, rising, falling, and rising again. Temples and tombs stood as anchors of this vision. They preserved the voices of priests, the prayers of farmers, the dreams of pharaohs, the hopes of children. Through them, the gods were honored, the ancestors remembered, the promise of eternity renewed. And though time would change, though the temples would one day fall silent, these beliefs remained at Egypt's core, carried through all ages, written in stone, sung in hymn, whispered along the Nile. The desert stretches wide and silent, a sea of sand shimmering beneath the sun. Upon its edges, rising like islands from the golden tide, stand monuments of stone. They are not merely buildings, not only walls and columns, but visions cast in earth to touch the eternal. The people of Egypt shaped stone as though it were a prayer, as though each block could bind heaven and earth together. Their temples and tombs, their pyramids and statues, were not simply for life, but for eternity. Walk with me now into these spaces, and feel their silence, their grandeur, their voice. Karnak rises in the east at Thebes, immense beyond measure. Its halls are forests of stone, columns soaring high, their tops carved like lotus blossoms opening toward the sky. The light drifts down through narrow spaces, catching dust motes that turn to gold. Inscriptions cover the walls, each figure alive with gods, kings, and offerings. Priests once walked these courts at dawn, pouring water from silver vessels, burning incense until the air grew thick with fragrance. Chants echoed between pillars, deep voices rising and falling in rhythm, hymns carried into heaven. A sacred lake lies still within the temple's heart, its waters reflecting the blue sky by day, the stars by night. It was said the gods themselves gazed into its surface. To stand here is to feel eternity pressing close, vast and solemn. Further south, Luxor glows with grace. Its temple is smaller, but no less sacred. At dusk, torches once flickered against its pylons, casting shadows that danced across carvings of kings embraced by gods. During festivals, statues of the divine were carried from Karnak to Luxor, a great procession filled with song, with dancers, with the sound of drums. At night, the avenue of sphinxes leading to the temple shone in torchlight, their lion bodies and human faces guarding the sacred path. Here, the people gathered not only to honor their gods, but to feel their presence moving among them. And upon the waters of the Nile, on an island surrounded by palm and stone, stood Philae, the temple of Isis. It was said her voice lingered longest in this place, long after others had faded. Her sanctuary glowed with devotion, her image carried by priests across the river, her hymns whispered by women seeking comfort, by sailors seeking safe passage, by mothers praying for their children. When the rest of the ancient world grew silent, Philae still echoed with her name. Its pylons rose like gates of heaven, its courts filled with offerings, its columns carved with stars and flowers. Even now, the stones seemed to breathe her presence, serene and tender. The temples were not only houses of gods, but centers of life. They were places where time and eternity touched, where festivals lit the streets with joy, where communities gathered to honor, to sing, to feast. They were schools, treasuries, sanctuaries. They bound villages to heaven, and heaven to the earth. Beyond the temples, tombs carried another vision. For death, to the Egyptians, was not an end but a beginning, a journey into eternity. Their tombs were not places of sorrow but houses of forever, crafted with care to guide souls safely to the field of reeds. In the Old Kingdom, pyramids rose like mountains of stone. At Saqqara, the step pyramid of Djoser stood as the first great monument, its terraces stacked like stairways to the sky. Later, at Giza, Khufu's Great Pyramid rose vast and precise, its sides aligned to the stars, its summit piercing heaven. Around it, smaller pyramids and temples stood, together forming a sacred landscape of eternity. The Sphinx crouched nearby, its gaze fixed eastward, guardian of mysteries. In the Middle Kingdom, tombs were carved into cliffs and rocks. Hidden chambers opened into painted halls, scenes of daily life etched upon their walls. Farmers harvesting, hunters with nets, musicians playing, families feasting. In these images, the dead were promised joy, abundance, and love forever. Each figure, each color, was a prayer given shape, a memory preserved against time. By the New Kingdom, tombs were hidden deep in the Valley of the Kings. Carved into the rock, their passages descended into cool darkness, winding into chambers painted with stars and gods. Blue ceilings shimmered with constellations, golden figures of Ra's boat sailed across walls, Osiris waited with arms outstretched. The Book of the Dead was inscribed in spells and images, guiding the soul past demons and guardians, through fire and shadow, toward the light of eternity. The air within was cool, the silence profound, broken only by the echo of footsteps. These were not houses of mourning, but maps of forever. The artisans of Deir el-Medina brought these visions to life. In their village, they lived and worked, craftsmen who carved and painted the tombs of kings. With steady hands, they shaped walls into smooth surfaces, traced outlines of gods and pharaohs, filled them with color ground from stone and plant. Red ochre, blue lapis, green malachite, gold leaf, they turned darkness into radiance. Their work was devotion, each brushstroke an offering, each carving a prayer. By day they labored in silence, by night they returned to their families, their own tombs simple but adorned with care. They were builders of eternity, though their names are rarely remembered. Architecture itself became language. The pyramids pointed to the heavens, their sides rising toward the stars, a message of aspiration, of connection between earth and sky. Obelisks, tall and slender, captured the light of the sun, their tips gleaming with gold, standing as frozen rays of Ra. Colossal statues, carved from single blocks of stone, stood guard at gates and temples. Their faces were serene, their size overwhelming, embodying the presence of gods and kings, guardians against time. Far to the south, at Abu Simbel, the colossal statues of Ramses II sit enthroned, their faces gazing across the Nile. They are carved directly from the mountain, for figures rising high, their features bold, their crowns tall. At dawn, twice each year, sunlight penetrates the temple, reaching the sanctuary deep within, illuminating statues of gods and king. It was no accident, it was design, a mastery of time and stone, a binding of heaven's rhythm to earth's monument. Standing before them, one feels both small and infinite, both fleeting and eternal. All these works, temples, tombs, pyramids, statues, were not built only for rulers or for gods. They were built for the idea of eternity itself. Each stone was a prayer against forgetting, each hall a bridge between now and forever. The people of Egypt believed that memory was life, that to be remembered was to endure, and so they carved their voices into stone, so that even when flesh faded, spirit might remain. Close your eyes and walk among them. Hear the echo of footsteps in a temple hall. Feel the cool shade beneath towering columns. See torchlight flicker across painted walls deep underground, where stars shine upon ceilings though the sky is far above. Stand before the Sphinx as desert winds sweep across your skin. Watch the sunrise fall upon Abu Simbel, golden light filling the darkness. These monuments remain, weathered yet proud, silent yet speaking. They have seen centuries pass, empires rise and fall, sands shift, waters flow. And still they whisper, of gods and kings, of prayers and dreams, of eternity sought and eternity found in stone. This is Egypt's gift. Not only life along the river, not only dynasties and battles, but the vision of forever shaped in temples, tombs, and monuments. They stand as voices across time, inviting us to listen, to walk in silence, to feel the eternal flowing through stone, through sand, through the river's endless course. In the cool shade of a tomb, a flickering lamp throws light upon walls alive with color. Figures stand in timeless stillness, kings and queens, gods and priests, hunters and dancers, painted in ochre, blue, green, and gold. Though centuries have passed, their faces glow softly, their gestures remain eternal. Here, in these images, we glimpse the heart of Egyptian culture, an art of permanence, a beauty carved and painted not for a moment, but for eternity. Egyptian art spoke with quiet symbolism. Kings and gods were shown in rigid poses, standing tall, their eyes gazing forward unblinking. Their stance was deliberate, a language of eternity, a refusal to bend before time. Lotuses bloomed across painted walls, symbols of rebirth, their petals opening with the dawn. Falcons spread their wings over royal heads, guardians of kingship, their sharp eyes fierce and divine. In every gesture, in every color, meaning flowed, a code of images that spoke of life, death, and the eternal beyond. Sculptors carved statues with serene faces and straight spines, bodies idealized, hands resting in calm. These were not portraits of fleeting moments, but vessels for spirit. When placed in temples, statues became homes for the gods, filled with incense and offerings. When placed in tombs, they preserved the presence of the dead, ensuring that memory would never fade. Jewelry too was alive with meaning. Amulets shaped as scarabs promised renewal, ankhs promised life, and golden bracelets inlaid with lapis lazuli and turquoise shimmered with the colors of heaven. Each object was more than beauty. It was protection, a prayer made solid, a dream made visible. And woven through all of this was writing. Hieroglyphs, sacred signs, filled the walls of temples and tombs. Each glyph was an image, an owl, a reed, a sun, a feather, yet together they spoke words, ideas, prayers. Carved deep into stone, painted upon plaster, they told the stories of kings, recorded offerings to the gods, preserved spells for the afterlife. Their forms were both art and language, pictures alive with meaning, words that could be seen as much as heard. Beside hieroglyphs, a quicker script, called hieratic, flowed across papyrus in the hands of scribes. With reed pens dipped in black and red ink, they wrote accounts of harvests, letters between officials, hymns to the gods. The rustle of scrolls, the scratch of pens, filled the air in schools and offices, a music of knowledge. Papyrus sheets, rolled into scrolls, carried wisdom across centuries. In them, prayers, mathematics, stories, and laws lived side by side, woven together in ink and fiber. Imagine a scribe at work. He sits cross-legged upon the throne of Egypt was not a chair of gold alone, but a symbol of heaven's order upon earth. To be Pharaoh was to be the living Horus, chosen to guard the two lands, keeper of Ma'at, the balance of justice, harmony, and truth. Each coronation was not simply the crowning of a ruler, but the renewal of the cosmos, a promise that life would continue as the Nile continued, as the sun rose each day over the desert horizon. In the silence of dawn, priests prepared the sacred rituals. The new king approached, robed in linen, his brow bound with symbols of eternity. Before him lay the crowns of Egypt. The white crown, tall and smooth, the crown of Upper Egypt, gleamed like ivory in the morning light. The red crown, flat and curling at the back, the crown of Lower Egypt, shone with painted brilliance. To unite them was to unite the two lands, to hold the valley and the delta, to bind north and south into one. Upon his head the double crown was placed, its shape rising like the union of opposites, its meaning clear. The pharaoh was lord of all. In his hands he carried the crook and flail. The crook, curved like a shepherd's staff, meant care, guidance, protection. The flail, with its dangling beads, meant authority, strength, the power to sustain and discipline. Together they were balance, gentleness and command, nurture and rule. To see them crossed upon the chest of a statue was to see Egypt's ideals carved into stone. Narmer, perhaps the first to wear both crowns, was remembered as the unifier. His palette, carved in stone, shows him grasping the hair of his enemy, lifting a mace in triumph, while the falcon of Horus hovers, watching blessing. In his time, the idea of Egypt as one nation was born, and all who followed bore his legacy. Djoser, centuries later, became the first great builder. Guided by his genius architect Imhotep, he raised the step pyramid at Saqqara, a stairway to heaven carved from stone. It was not only his tomb, but a vision, a promise that kingship was eternal, that Egypt's rulers would live forever in monuments that touched the sky. Thutmose III, remembered as the warrior pharaoh, led Egypt's armies into foreign lands. His chariots thundered through Canaan and Syria, his banners flew beyond the Nile. Tribute poured into Egypt, gold, ebony, incense, exotic animals, and captives. Yet his monuments also sing of devotion to Ammonius, the hidden god, his temples rising in Thebes as proof that victory was more than conquest. It was divine order fulfilled. And Ramses II, whom later ages called the Great, built with a hand so vast that his name remains carved in every corner of the land. At Abu Simbel, his colossal statues stare across the river, unblinking, eternal. At Karnak and Luxor, his halls echo with inscriptions of battles and offerings. He signed one of the earliest peace treaties, and filled his reign with wives, children, temples, and memory. To walk through Egypt is still to walk in the shadow of Ramses. Yet not only kings wore the crowns of power. Queens, too, stepped into eternity's light. Hatshepsut, in the 15th century before our era, declared herself not only queen but king. She wore the false beard, the crowns, the regalia, presenting herself in statues as male, yet in truth redefining kingship itself. She ruled wisely, sending ships to punt for incense and treasures, raising her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a masterpiece of terraces and colonnades, glowing against cliffs in the desert sun. Her reign was peace, prosperity, and vision, proof that power was not bound by gender but by will and divine right. Nefertiti, wife of Akhenaten, shines still as a symbol of beauty and devotion. In the city of Amarna, she stood beside her husband in worship of Aten, the sun disk, their faces raised to its rays. Her statues, with graceful neck and serene eyes, are among the most beloved of all time. Yet beyond beauty, she was strength, ruling beside her king in a moment of radical change, guiding Egypt through upheaval and faith. And Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, stands at the threshold of history and legend. Fluent in tongues, skilled in politics, radiant in charm, she held Egypt's sovereignty against the rising power of Rome. She walked with Caesar, dreamed with Antony, and in her death by ASP became the last sovereign of an ancient land. Her story closes the chapter of Pharaohs, yet her memory endures as symbol of power, passion, and loss. In the palaces of Egypt, life unfolded with majesty. Halls adorned with lotus blossoms and papyrus stems echoed with music. Harpists plucked strings, flutes trilled, dancers swayed. Courtyards filled with light where fountains splashed and birds called. Ambassadors from Nubia, from Byblos, from distant lands brought tribute, gold, ivory, cedar wood, fine oils. Pharaohs received them on thrones of gold, their crowns gleaming, their attendants fanning the air with ostrich plumes. Words were spoken in reverence, offerings laid at feet, order reaffirmed in ritual and display. Dynasties rose and fell, yet the thread of kingship endured. From one pharaoh to the next, from father to son, from queen to heir, the story wove onward. Some reigns were long and glorious, others brief and troubled, but each was part of the fabric of Egypt. Each bore the weight of Ma'at, the responsibility to uphold balance against chaos. Colossal statues bore their faces, carved into cliffs, placed before temples, lined along avenues. Names were inscribed in cartouches, sacred ovals binding them to eternity. Even when dynasties faded, even when memory grew dim, the stone remained, whispering, "Here once stood a king, a queen, a guardian of the two lands." Close your eyes and imagine the coronation of a pharaoh. The temple is hushed, its air heavy with incense. Priests chant, drums echo, the sacred crowns gleam upon an altar. The king approaches, his steps steady, his heart aligned with Ma'at. The double crown is lifted, placed upon his head. In that moment, he becomes more than man. He becomes Horus on earth, chosen of the gods, keeper of Egypt. Outside, the people cheer, trumpets sound, lotus petals scatter in the air. The Nile flows on, eternal witness. The pharaohs were not only rulers of flesh and blood, but symbols of eternity, of the bond between heaven and earth. Their courts shimmered with gold, their armies marched with banners, their temples glowed with offerings. Yet above all, they carried the weight of order, the balance of Ma'at. When we walk among their monuments now, when we see their names upon stone, when we look upon statues of serene faces and crowns of power, we remember. The dynasties may have passed, the palaces may have crumbled, but the idea of the pharaoh endures, guardian of the two lands, chosen of the gods, eternal voice of Egypt. The Nile flows quietly, its waters calm, its rhythm eternal. Yet beyond its fertile banks, the world was never still. The deserts that seemed to protect Egypt also opened onto lands filled with other peoples, other powers, and sometimes rival ambitions. Egypt, though blessed by the river and shielded by sand, could not remain apart from the wider world. Through the centuries, it would march in war, receive foreign gifts, send envoys across deserts, and welcome strangers into its gates. In battles and treaties, in triumph and defeat, the story of Egypt intertwined with the story of its neighbors. Even in its earliest days, conflict was a path to unity. Long before the pyramids, the people of Upper and Lower Egypt lived as separate regions. Their crowns were different, their lands distinct. The narrow valley of the south crowned in white, the broad delta of the north in red. Rivalry brewed along the river, each side seeking to hold all. It was through these early struggles, historians suggest, that Egypt became one. Narmer, or perhaps others like him, rose in battle, uniting the two lands beneath a single crown. From bloodshed came order, and from rivalry, the vision of a nation stretching from first cataract to sea. Centuries later, as Egypt grew into empire, its armies reached beyond its own soil. The new kingdom pharaohs, proud and ambitious, carried banners far into foreign lands. Their chariots gleamed in sunlight, their horses adorned with feathers and bells. Drums beat, horns blared, and soldiers marched with shields of leather, spears tipped in bronze, bows curved and strung. Dust rose from their steps, swirling around banners painted with falcons and suns. The air trembled with voices chanting hymns to Ammonius, guardian of the pharaoh's strength. Among these kings, Thutmose III shone brightest as the warrior pharaoh. Historians call him Egypt's Napoleon, though he lived centuries before. He led campaigns across deserts and mountains, through Canaan and into Syria. At Megiddo, he fought a battle that opened roads to conquest. City after city bent to his banners, tribute flowing southward, gold from mines, ebony from forests, cattle, horses, and captives. His scribes recorded lists of wonders, exotic plants, animals unknown to Egypt, treasures carried from distant lands. Yet his victories were not only of arms. They were also of diplomacy. Foreign princes sent sons to be educated at Egypt's court, binding loyalty through learning. In this way, the world flowed into Egypt, and Egypt flowed outward, a river of power stretching beyond the Nile. Ramses II too left his mark upon the sands of war. At Kadesh, on the banks of the Orontes, he met the Hittites, a rival power from Anatolia. The clash was fierce. Chariots roared across plains, spears pierced shields, dust filled the air, and the cries of men and horses mingled in chaos. Ramses himself, inscriptions claim, stood in his chariot, charging into enemies, his bow raining arrows, his presence like a god of war. Yet the battle ended not in triumph, but in stalemate. Neither side broke, neither side claimed victory absolute. And so, from blood and dust, came words of peace. Egypt and the Hittites signed a treaty, carved upon tablets, swearing brotherhood and alliance. It is said to be the world's first known peace treaty, a document of ink, an oath that carried as much power as any spear. But Egypt was never free from challenge. From the west came the Libyans, nomads of the desert, pressing against the delta. From the south came the Nubians, both trading and warring, their kings at times ruling Egypt itself. From the east came the Assyrians, fierce and disciplined, their armies breaking through Egypt's defenses with iron weapons and chariots. And later, from far Persia, vast armies crossed deserts, their banners stretching like seas, their kings taking the title of pharaoh as conquerors. Yet even under foreign rule, Egypt absorbed and transformed. Libyan chiefs became Egyptian kings, carving their names in hieroglyphs. Nubian rulers built temples to Ammonius, standing as heirs to pharaonic tradition. Persian kings honored Egyptian gods, placing offerings at sacred shrines. Egypt bent, but it did not break. Its essence endured, its culture absorbing foreign strands as the Nile absorbs tributaries, carrying them into its flow. War was not always Egypt's choice, nor conquest its only tool. Diplomacy, too, bound nations together. Pharaohs took foreign brides, princesses from Babylon, Hutti, and Mitanni, marriages sealing peace and alliance. Caravans crossed deserts laden with gifts, silver, cedar wood, ivory, lapis lazuli. Envoys bowed before the pharaoh, their words translated by scribes, their hands offering treasures. In return, Egypt sent grain, gold, papyrus, and linen. Trade and tribute mingled with politics and prayer, a quieter rhythm than war, but just as vital. Imagine the scene of a foreign envoy arriving at Thebes. The palace glimmers with banners. Musicians play soft harps, their strings singing through the halls. Perfume drifts from lotus blossoms arranged in golden bowls. The pharaoh sits upon his throne, radiant in crown and jewels, his eyes steady. The envoy steps forward, laying gifts at his feet, fine horses, gleaming vessels, exotic animals. Words are exchanged, promises sworn, peace renewed. Outside, the Nile flows by, carrying ships heavy with grain, their sails white against the sky. For the ordinary soldier, war was dust and sweat, the weight of shield and spear, the creak of leather straps, the heat of sun upon skin. For the generals, it was strategy, maps unrolled upon wooden tables, lines drawn with careful hands. For the pharaoh, it was both glory and duty, the need to guard Egypt's borders, to uphold Ma'at against chaos. And for the people, victories brought wealth and tribute, while defeats brought sorrow and loss. Yet through all, the river still flooded, the fields still grew, the temples still echoed with prayers. Battles were storms upon the surface, while beneath, the Nile's eternal rhythm continued. Historians believe that Egypt was never solely a land of war. It was a land of balance. Its greatness was not only in conquest, but in cultivation, not only in armies, but in temples, art, and the lives of its people. The chariot wheels turned, the spears clashed, the treaties were signed. But when the dust settled, the Nile still shimmered, the farmers still sowed, the gods still watched. Close your eyes and imagine the desert plain after battle. The dust has fallen. The cries have faded. The sun sinks low, painting the sky in red and gold. Broken chariots lie scattered, shields rest upon the sand, the air heavy with silence. A falcon soars overhead, its wings wide, its cry sharp. In that silence, Egypt endures, not in conquest, not in loss, but in the eternal flow of its river, the eternal voice of its land. Thus, Egypt's story with the wider world was one of both war and peace, of conquest and alliance, of defense and absorption. Armies marched, treaties were sworn, dynasties shifted, but the essence remained. Egypt was more than its battles. It was the rhythm of eternity, a land where gods and kings, farmers and scribes, warriors and priests all played their part. And though invaders came, though conquerors claimed crowns, Egypt's soul was never theirs to take. It endured, quiet and strong, like the Nile beneath the desert sun. The Nile was Egypt's heart. Its waters flowed steady and sure, from distant highlands through desert, spreading life across the land. Each year, the flood came, dark waters swelling, spilling over the banks, leaving behind rich silt black as night. This soil was Egypt's treasure, the gift that fed its people and sustained its kings. But the river was more than fertile earth. It was a highway, a lifeline, a thread connecting village to village, city to city, and Egypt to the wider world. Upon its waters glided boats of papyrus and wood, their sails full, their holds heavy with goods. Grain and gold, incense and jewels, all drifted with the current, carried to markets where voices rose in trade. At dawn, when the mist lay low across the water, farmers loaded baskets of barley, jars of beer, and bundles of vegetables onto small boats. The air was cool, the river calm, the oars dipping with gentle rhythm. By midday, the markets of Memphis or Thebes would be alive with bustle. Potters displayed jars still warm from the kiln, their clay smelling of earth and fire. Weavers laid out linen, smooth and white, glowing in the sun. Carpenters brought stools and boxes carved from local wood, polished until they shone. Jewelry sellers displayed beads of shell and stone, their colors catching the light. The smell of bread drifted from ovens, mingling with the fragrance of onions, garlic, and herbs. Musicians played flutes and lutes, their melodies threading through the hum of voices. In every corner, hands exchanged goods, grain for fish, linen for pottery, silver for oil. The local markets were not only places of buying and selling, but of meeting and sharing. News passed here, stories told, songs sung. Farmers, fishermen, priests, and scribes mingled, their voices rising in a chorus of daily life. Trade was the breath of the community, as essential as the Nile itself. But beyond the fields and villages, Egypt reached outward. Its wealth was not only of grain and flax, but of treasures drawn from lands afar. From Nubia came gold, bright and heavy, mined from riverbeds and deserts. Ebony, dark as night, carved into statues and furniture, flowed north. Ivory tusks, smooth and pale, became combs, ornaments, and inlays. Nubia's cattle too were driven into Egypt, their horns adorned, their hides tanned into leather. To the Egyptians, Nubia was both neighbor and jewel box, a source of riches carried by caravan and boat. From Lebanon came cedar wood, tall and strong, unmatched in the Nile Valley. The Egyptians valued it for shipbuilding, for doors of temples, for beams that supported roofs. The scent of cedar filled workshops, sharp and sweet, its grain polished to gleam. It was said that pharaohs prized it above all timbers, for it lasted long, resisting decay, as eternal as the monuments it adorned. To the mysterious land of Punt, ships sailed across the Red Sea. The journey was long, the waters sometimes perilous, yet the rewards were rich. From Punt came incense, frankincense and myrrh, resins whose fragrance filled temples and homes. Their smoke rose in offering to the gods, carrying prayers heavenward. Exotic animals too were brought, baboons chattering, panthers pacing, birds with bright feathers. Ivory, ebony, and gold came from Punt, gifts of a land half real, half legend, yet always remembered with longing. From the east and beyond, traders carried lapis lazuli, deep blue stone from mountains far away. Its color was that of the night sky, of the heavens themselves. Egyptians ground it into paint, its blue shining on tomb walls, or set it into jewelry alongside turquoise and carnelian. Each piece glittered like the stars above. The marketplaces of great cities swelled with these wonders. At Thebes, the air shimmered with perfumes, spices, and the chatter of tongues. At Memphis, carts rolled in from villages, while ships docked at the harbor, their hulls filled with treasure. At Alexandria, later in time, the harbor was a forest of masts, ships from Greece, Rome, and beyond jostling for place. Fishermen sold their catches, merchants shouted prices, scribes tallied accounts on papyrus scrolls. Greek voices mingled with Egyptian chants, Roman coins clinked beside local barter. The city became a mirror of the world itself, reflecting Egypt's place as hub of exchange. Throughout the centuries, the Nile carried it all. Papyrus boats swayed on the current, their sails billowing. Oars dipped and rose, dipping and rising again. Fishermen cast their nets, the shimmer of scales flashing in the sun. Traders piled baskets high, voices calling across the water as they passed. Temples rose on the riverbanks, their pylons watching, while villages bustled with life. The river was constant, yet always moving, the pulse of trade, the heartbeat of wealth. In the late period, Egypt's ties to the Mediterranean deepened. Greek merchants settled at Naucratis, their ships unloading pottery, wine, oil. They brought ideas as well as goods, their voices mingling with Egyptian in the markets. Later, under the Ptolemies, Alexandria became the jewel of the Mediterranean, its lighthouse guiding ships, its library imagined as storehouse of wisdom, its markets teeming with wealth. Grain flowed from Egypt in endless supply, filling Roman ships, feeding empires. The Nile was not only Egypt's lifeblood, but Rome's as well, its grain sustaining millions across the sea. Historians suggest that Egypt's prosperity was always a balance of river and road, field and market, local and foreign. Farmers in small villages worked with devotion, sowing and reaping, their grain stored in granaries that filled temples and households. Artisans shaped their crafts with care, turning raw earth into beauty. Merchants carried goods along dusty roads, their donkeys laden with jars and baskets. Beyond them, caravans crossed deserts, ships braved seas, bringing Egypt treasures from far and wide. Close your eyes now, and imagine standing in a market at Thebes. The air hums with voices. The smell of bread fresh from the oven mingles with the tang of onions and garlic. A potter's wheel spins, clay rising beneath steady hands. A jeweler holds a golden necklace to the light, its lapis stones glimmering like the night sky. Children run between stalls, laughing, carrying figs in their hands. A priest buys incense, its fragrance already curling into the air. Musicians pluck harps, their notes floating above the crowd. Around you the Nile shimmers, boats gliding past, their sails white against the sky. This is Egypt's wealth, not only in gold or grain, but in life itself, in the heartbeat of people gathered together. Trade supported temples, whose walls rose with offerings carved in stone. It funded monuments, pyramids, and tombs that reached for eternity. It sustained soldiers, artisans, and scribes, binding Egypt into unity. Wealth flowed like the river itself, steady and sure, feeding not only bodies, but spirits, dreams, and prayers. And yet, beyond treasure and abundance, there was always connection. Each jar of incense was a bridge to Punt, each beam of cedar a link to Lebanon, each bead of lapis a whisper from distant mountains. Through trade, Egypt was never alone. It was woven into the fabric of the wider world, a part of something greater, yet always rooted in its own river, its own soil, its own eternity. In this way, Egypt's story of trade and wealth is also the story of its soul, a land where the Nile carried life, and life carried meaning, flowing forever like the river itself. The desert lies quiet beneath the stars. The wind whispers across the sand, carrying with it the scent of earth cooled by night. In the distance, a dark shape rises, a pyramid, its vast sides pointing toward heaven. Silent, solemn, yet alive with memory, it has stood for thousands of years, its stones a chorus of voices from the past. Egypt endures here, not only in stone and sand, but in the breath of time itself. The story of this land began with the river. Along its banks, the first families planted seeds, drew water, and raised shelters of reed and clay. They looked to the floods for life, to the stars for guidance, to the gods for protection. In time, villages became kingdoms, kingdoms became one nation, and one nation became empire. Pharaohs ruled, monuments rose, armies marched, and priests prayed. Dynasties rose, dynasties fell, yet through it all the Nile flowed steady, carrying the lifeblood of Egypt from age to age. Though kings and queens have passed, their presence remains. The pyramids of Giza still pierce the horizon, their stones warmed each morning by the rising sun. The temples of Karnak and Luxor still stand, columns tall as forests, inscriptions alive with stories of gods and kings. The statues of Ramses at Abu Simbel still gaze over the river, their faces serene, their gaze unbroken. Even the silent Sphinx, half buried in sand, half revealed, watches the dawn as it has for millennia. These are not ruins only. They are echoes, memories made visible, voices of eternity carved in stone. In later ages, travelers came to see them. From Greece and Rome, men and women journeyed to Egypt, marveling at wonders already ancient. They walked among colonnades, traced carvings with their hands, wrote of temples and tombs. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, yet Egypt remained, its monuments patient, waiting beneath the desert sky. The rediscovery of its language opened the gates of memory anew. When the Rosetta Stone was found, its scripts carved in 3 tongues, it became the key to unlock hieroglyphs long silent. Scholars bent over its lines, tracing symbols with care. In time, Jean-François Champollion gave breath to words once lost. The prayers of pharaohs, the songs of scribes, the wisdom of texts whispered again. Egypt's voice, thought silenced, returned to the world. Modern explorers walked where ancient feet once trod. They entered tombs in the Valley of the Kings, lanterns casting light on painted walls alive with gods and stars. They uncovered treasures buried for millennia, amulets of gold, statues of deities, chests filled with offerings. The tomb of Tutankhamun, small yet radiant, dazzled the modern world with its wealth, its golden mask shining like the sun. These discoveries did not bring the past alive, for it had never truly died. They only revealed what had always been waiting. Egypt's influence rippled outward like waves upon the Nile. Its art, with lines graceful and measured, inspired later ages. Its temples, with columns soaring, became models of grandeur. Its stories of Osiris, Isis, Horus, lingered in echoes, shaping myths far beyond its borders. Its vision of eternity, of life beyond death, whispered into human dreams across time. Even the very image of the pyramid became a symbol of permanence, of aspiration, of the bond between earth and sky. Close your eyes, and imagine standing now at the edge of the Nile. The water flows dark beneath the starlight, its surface rippling with silver reflections. A cool breeze drifts across your skin, carrying the scent of lotus blossoms, faint and sweet. In the distance, palm trees sway softly, their fronds whispering. Above, the stars shine as they did for the ancients, constellations unchanged, their light older than memory. You breathe, and you share the same air once breathed by farmers, by pharaohs, by priests chanting hymns at dawn. The moment is timeless. The past is not gone. It flows into the present, as the river flows from its source to the sea. The legacy of Egypt is not only in monuments or in texts, but in this feeling of continuity, of endurance, of eternity close at hand. The Nile still floods, bringing life to fields. The pyramids still rise against the horizon. The gods still whisper from carved walls, their voices soft but unbroken. Egypt is both past and present, both memory and dream. Historians suggest that what made Egypt endure was not only its wealth, its armies, or its rulers, but its vision. A vision of order, of balance, of guiding life. A vision that saw death not as ending, but as transformation. A vision that carved prayers into stone and painted them onto tomb walls, so that memory itself became immortal. In this vision, Egypt still lives, for memory is stronger than time, and the whispers of eternity are never lost. The world has changed, dynasties gone, empires faded, yet Egypt's presence remains woven into the fabric of human thought. Its art inspires, its architecture teaches, its writing speaks, its myths enchant. In every age since, men and women have turned to its monuments and asked, how did they endure? How did they dream? What secrets lie within their silence? And Egypt answers not in words, but in stone, in river, in starlight. Perhaps the greatest legacy is not the monuments themselves, but the reminder they bring, that humanity can reach beyond the fleeting, can create beauty and meaning that outlasts time. That to live is also to remember, and to be remembered is to endure. Egypt offers this truth, carved in granite, written in ink, carried in song. So now, at the close of our journey, we stand again at the river. The water flows past, endless, eternal. The stars shimmer above, unchanged, unbroken. The pyramids rise on the horizon, silent, solemn, serene. The air is still, the night vast, the desert infinite. And yet within this stillness, there is peace, there is wonder, there is eternity. The story of Egypt has been told, from the first farmers who planted seeds in black soil, to the last queen who faced Rome's embrace. It is a story of gods and kings, of builders and dreamers, of victories and trials, of life and afterlife. It is a story that has no true end, for Egypt endures wherever memory holds it, wherever stone still stands, wherever the river flows. Close your eyes, and let the sound of the Nile carry you. Hear its waters, soft and eternal. Feel the cool night wind against your face. See the stars reflected upon the dark surface. In this moment, you are part of Egypt's story, for it belongs not only to the past, but to all who remember, all who dream. And so our journey ends, not with silence, but with continuity. Egypt whispers still, in ruins and in rivers, in memory and in time. It endures in every stone, every story, every breath of desert wind. Its voice is eternal, its spirit unbroken.